The story of everyone's favorite bear and bird combo is pretty well documented. The first game was amazing, the second was good, and the third had cars for some reason. That choice to go from being a classic collectathon platformer to this was certainly a decision of all time by the now Microsoft-owned Rareware company, especially since it had been 8 years since the last proper Banjo experience. Honestly, it's really no surprise that the original games community got very angry. But I was not a part of that community, since when the series started in 1998, I was still waiting to see how Y2K played out before being born. So while I have gone back and played the originals, even putting Banjo-Kazooie as one of my favorite games of all time, my relationship with the series began with nuts and bolts. And at that time, I absolutely loved this game. Though back then I was just an 8-year-old kid, not yet jaded by the years of online negativity and paying taxes. So today I want to go back and really look to see if this game is as bad as many Banjo fans would have you believe, or if it was just a solid game in a bad package. It's been a while since I've made a video, and I'm so glad to have you all alongside me for this nostalgic ride. If you end up enjoying it at any point, consider giving that subscribe button just a little bit of a poke, because I intend to be back for quite a while. And one last thing, I am really not a game reviewer. I do these because I enjoy revisiting past games and just seeing what worked for me, as well as pointing out some things that I might have had issues with. It's much more of a personal look back than a review, and I'm sure we're going to disagree on one or many things, but hopefully you can see where I'm coming from for the most part. Alright, let's get into it. We open on a nice narrated recap of Banjo's previous outings, a necessary addition since a lot of Xbox 360 owners probably haven't played those original titles. Then we see the character redesigns, and oh boy did people have opinions on this. It seems like Rare wanted to create a sort of modern N64 look by making all of the characters' features be their own little box or pseudo low poly shape. And while it did work really well for characters like Mumbo and Grunty, our main duo kind of looked like Temu brand knockoffs, which is not really what you want for your main character's first jump to a new system and new owned company. So when you look at nuts and bolts in isolation, it really isn't the worst design, and they do blend well into the rest of the game's art design. But when you change something so drastic about your main characters that your core fan base loves, and it isn't an objective improvement in every single way, and it very much wasn't, don't get me wrong, people are going to be extremely critical of it. Which then leads us to the full introduction of our lovable duo, who have spent the last 8 years munching on pizza and playing their Xbox. As a side note, this image was probably really weird for fans coming from the N64 days. They flaunt about how them gaining a couple of pounds doesn't matter much, since the last time I saw Grunty, it involved playing soccer with her decapitated head. But since Kazooie just had to bring her up, Grunty's head starts making its way down to Banjo to, I guess, bite his ankles? Nibble on some toes? I really don't know what her plan was here, and we will never get an answer to this question because the epic matchup of Old Lady Severed Head versus Fat Bear was interrupted by the power of Comic Sans and Log, also known as LOG, also known as the Lord of Games. I will be using all three interchangeably throughout the video to make the most amount of people angry. Thank me later. This Karen wannabe is stated to be the creator of every single video game ever, which has some wild implications when you think about it for a minute, because that would mean this thing canonically created both Elder Scrolls Oblivion and All-Stars Strip Poker Girls at Work just months apart. Make it make sense, Rare. Make it make sense. Existential crisis about that aside, this extremely meta opening introduces the stakes for this adventure. The loser of a collectathon challenge between Grunty and Banjo will have to work in Log's game factory for the rest of time, which also brings us to another thing many people point to as a reason to hate this game, the fact that it seemingly hates its roots as a collectathon. Now, the Banjo series has always been a little bit meta and self-deprecating, so here the challenge our Lord of Games sets up is the most basic, stereotypically bad collection system. Then, after a couple of seconds, points out that gamers today just want to shoot things, and talks about how dated the series was. When comparing this to Kazooie and Tooie, it feels a lot more mean-spirited, and while this obviously didn't bother me very much as a kid, and even now honestly it's just kind of a whatever thing, I can see why it might rub some people the wrong way right off the bat. Log's idea of a better concept is to take away all of the previous game's moves and give Banjo a car. I'm gonna get more in depth with the whole vehicle system later, since it's the main selling point of the game, but right now I'll just say the controls for our new trolley can feel a little bit clunky, though it doesn't take long to get the hang of it once you start moving around. That jank never fully goes away, but you do learn to live with it, which is kind of charming in a sit back and watch the silliness kind of way. Our bird friend Kazooie suffers the most by far to this new system, given the only real purpose she has is to hold a magical wrench that can be used to edit your vehicle on the fly, do a silly little spin attack, pick things up, and summon your car whenever you either can't find it or are just feeling too lazy to walk the 20 feet, which is most of the time when I use it. So anyway, hopping into the much less cool car, which was clearly the one designed for us given the other one was all witchy, so thanks for that LOG, opens up the Showdown Town door, this game's hub world. Each section of the town is gated by different upgrades you get to your base trolley throughout the game, with things like high traction wheels letting you climb the steep green ramps, or a laser opening up locked areas. It's honestly a pretty great way to naturally section off late game parts and locations you can find without just using invisible walls or simple locked doors. But then you can kind of just do what most people probably figured out, place a crate on the trolley and use the wrench to fly to blocked off locations. I seriously cannot believe they did not find this in playtesting. It is one of the most obvious bugs I've ever seen. But unlike the previous games, there's pretty much no moment in the hub location where you aren't within a couple feet of an NPC you can interact with. Even Grunty is just casually chilling under the Jiggy machine, which definitely does take the sails out of her being a big bad, but honestly thematically she works a lot more as a rival than a villain in Nuts and Bolts. So in a way I kinda get it. As you drive around committing various acts of violence while learning the game, the NPCs will talk to you and attempt to make you feel bad, which is fun. I kind of like it. Once again, there's just a lot of small things about this game that give it some charm. That does sometimes cause the cops who patrol the town to chase Banjo until your GTA wanted level goes down though, which is a pretty annoying aspect of the game. Because outside of making Jiggies harder to collect, which I do gotta say is an odd choice for a collectathon, the 12's main purpose is to act as a foil to the player's attempts to free the falsely imprisoned Jinjos and replace them with their should-be-imprisoned evil counterpart. But they can be bribed with enough notes, so once again, money solves all problems. Rare really getting that social commentary in. You'll also find Mumbo crates scattered all around which can be brought to Mumbo's motors, and honestly, I don't really know why, but him going from Magic Man to Mechanic is definitely the smoothest character transition we got from Tooie to Nuts and Bolts. It just kinda makes sense. When he opens these boxes for you, you get access to different parts for this game's big main gimmick, the vehicle creation system. Alright, let's buckle up, let's put our helmets on, get our flame shields out, because it's time to talk about the cars. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm about to be very positive, so that might take you for surprise, but bear with me. See what I did there? The actual creation workshop feels just as smooth as I remembered, and it really lets you get creative with what kind of machine you can make and test out. It uses a sort of grid block-based system for ease of use, and you should get the hang of it within a couple of attempts. Plus, you can simply head to the test track to see how your masterpiece will function in various situations. Hint, most of the time early on, it probably won't. Similar to what you see in various kart racers, your vehicle is going to get different stats as you add or remove parts, things such as weight, fuel capacity, or ammo. These are a pretty great way to give a basic indication on what your contraption might be good at, and are really helpful for beginners as they kind of navigate the new system. There's honestly no limit to the kind of things you can create with the absurd amount of different part types you collect as the game goes on, and the satisfaction you can get from overcoming a difficult challenge by finding the just right combination and layout is honestly a feeling that's hard to match in a lot of games. You know that you truly earned that trophy by using a creative, fun solution that maybe no one else has thought of. These vehicles have 3 main modes: air, water, and ground, which is shocking, I know. If I had to rank them from best to worst feeling, I would say the air controls are definitely the best, then water, then ground, which is a little bit unfortunate since a large majority of the game will be spent on ground movement. The flying is extremely smooth compared to everything else in this game. You'll probably find yourself actively looking for ways to get wings or propellers on any car you can just so you can use it. And it's honestly a similar story with water. The only reason I have it lower is that water is kind of barely in the game. The ground movement itself isn't bad, it's just not great. The controls can feel pretty unresponsive or just kind of wonky, but it's honestly charming in a sort of way. I don't know, I'm 100% biased here, but I kind of love it. We take it for granted now since a lot of games have We take it for granted now since a lot of games have implemented similar concepts. Alright, first try, nailed it. But this freeform creation was really an innovative idea for the time, and they managed to do the task pretty well. So to sum it all up, if you like playing with Legos as a kid, or you're like me and you still do, no judgment here, you're the kind of player that Rare was trying to draw in here. Outside of those part boxes for the building system, scattered around town you'll find classic notes as collectibles, which now come in bronze, silver, and gold form. While the returning Jiggies are pretty much unchanged from the original game, being used to open up new locations, the notes are now meant to buy different upgrades around Showdown Town. This includes stuff like custom car blueprints if you're lazy, Banjo stat upgrades, and the like. Unlike the Jiggies though, the notes are meant to be collected on foot mostly, at least in the hub world. And man, this could use a little bit more time in the oven. They were not cooking. With the cars being the main focus, Banjo and his feisty bird friend lost access to most, if not all, of their good moves, and a good percentage of their speed. So those notes that you need to run or climb around town to collect feel extremely tedious and just clunky as you hobble around town. You can do some interesting moves when you mix climbing with the slight jump extension your wrench attack gets you, but honestly it just feels like wasted potential. If they wanted to have some normal classic platforming inside of Showdown Town, they probably needed to keep at least some of the classic moves for out-of-car navigation, or gave us some more newer mechanics mechanics to work with. It's honestly a relatively small issue, and you can go pretty much the entire game without spending notes, without losing much, if anything at all, but that might be a whole nother problem we won't really talk about. All of these collectibles and different aspects around Showdown Town attempt to bring back that feeling of exploration that the original duology had that kind of gets lost inside of the main levels of Nuts and Bolts. It has different forms of puzzles, like the way you unlock the Gigaseum, a bunch of returning and new characters to interact with for small little gameplay changes or just some charm, and even Easter eggs hidden all around, including the finally realized stop and swap system. Yeah, that's right, after 10 years, Rare's dream of connected Banjo games finally came true in the form of small vehicle parts that are purely cosmetic. That's a little bit disappointing, but honestly, Stop and Swap was a failed concept back in the N64 days, so it's kind of nice to see it finished in some form. And the Lord of Games has a funny joke about it at the end, so it was all worth it. But you know, none of that really matters if the levels you visit aren't interesting. So how are the actual playable worlds? Well, since Rare set out to be quirky and different this year, each location is unlocked in separate acts, not in a linear world-to-world pattern. And this does make it harder to talk about the levels in, say, maybe a long retrospective style YouTube video. I do really enjoy how the game flows because of it. Jiggies inside of Nuts and Bolts are collected via challenges from the NPCs scattered around the world, not just floating to be found, with each act having its own unique set of challenges. So what this act structure allows is for you to have the same world feel different as you get farther into the game, thus allowing you to see different aspects of it and get more interesting challenges without everything feeling cluttered while keeping the visuals interesting as you bounce between areas. The NPCs sure do like to yap though. Their dialogue took a massive step back overall from the original games, I gotta say. And honestly, I really wish they would have done more with this act-to-act concept, because while each one does feel different because of the challenges, most of the time the environment stays the exact same. On the rare occasions where they completely revamp a level for just one act, it feels like a massive step up from the rest of the game. Another thing that this bouncing worlds concept also introduces is some balancing issues. Since you'll have to bounce between worlds to get enough jiggies to advance in the game, if you don't do each act as it's unlocked, you'll oftentimes end up with parts that are way ahead of the current challenge. I mean, there were races here where I was a full lap away from the other challengers and I wasn't going back and replaying them. The challenges themselves that you'll find range from combat to racing to escorts, with your collectible reward being based off how fast or in how few movements you get the objective done. If you're terrible, you get notes. Pretty hard to do that, honestly. If you just manage to get it done, you get a jiggy. And if you are Speed Incarnate, you get a Trophy Tom trophy, which can be exchanged for jiggies at a 4-to-1 ratio. These challenges come in two different categories. The normal ones where you use your own car, and then the ones you're gonna skip. Yeah, the Log's Choice missions are by far the worst part of this game. Instead of flexing your brain to create fun vehicles, you have to bang your head against a wall while hoping you cheese your way into a trophy, with this abomination of a mechanical beast. You can pause the mission at the start to rework it on the fly and make it easier, but one, most people probably aren't gonna think of that, and two, at that point you might as well be making your own. I do really like when they throw these curveball missions in that are varied enough where you can't just make a one-size-fits-all car that will do everything for you. Oftentimes in these kind of creative games, you'll always end up with an easy, use this for everything type of setup. And Nuts and Bolts does have this in some areas, but generally avoids that by sprinkling these off-the-wall challenges in that you'll probably need a whole new car just for that one mission. Then on top of the basic challenges, Jinjos return as a special collectible, not giving jiggies, but instead giving Jinjo coins that can be used to play bingo in Showdown Town. And honestly, this is a big way that Nuts and Bolts was way ahead of its time, since if they would have just added a way to buy more bingo coins, they could have packaged it at $10 a loot box and just called it Overwatch. Honestly, a really big missed opportunity. Modern gaming industry aside, the Jinjo challenges are just okay. They can be fun to try and hunt for and kind of get that exploration back, but the activities themselves are not anything groundbreaking. Each world is also massive compared to the rest of the series, at the cost of only getting 6 of them unlike 9 in the previous games. This is clearly done to account for the high-speed movement of the vehicle system, but I can't help but feel like many of the worlds are either a little too empty or completely cluttered depending on what kind of lanes they want you to drive in. Compare what we see in a place like Treasure Trove Cove from the original, where every single piece of terrain or scenery feels intentionally placed, versus the mostly empty open world of Nutty Anchors or Gigaseum, or the absolutely unbearably tight and overflow design of Logbox 720. But now let's talk about Nutty Anchors, which is the first world. With this being the first world that Mr. LOG set us up in, Nutty Anchors acts as an introduction to the game, so the general layout and early act challenges are kept fairly simple. It's a very peaceful and open level where you just kind of go relatively long stretches without seeing an NPC or an enemy. And one positive part of that is that you really get to try out the new driving controls without many problems of random terrain or bumps along the way, something you don't really get inside of the test-a-track because it's so condensed. And honestly, it makes for a really good practice level, more so than the test-a-track in a lot of ways. The world is kind of a blend in what feels like the vibe of an OG Banjo-Kazooie level mixed with the new style of nuts and bolts. Everything in the meadow, including the volcano, is designed to look like it's patched together artificial nature with giant cogs spinning out of the water to hold up the fake sky. It honestly creates a fairly unique and interesting visual for the area, even if the lack of content inside of it can drag it down a little bit. And this next part is kind of true for every single world in the game, but I'm going to talk about it here since it's the first one. You're going to notice that pretty much everything in this game is breakable and can be used with your wrench. It's not always the most useful thing, honestly it actually rarely is, but it's kind of a fun little mechanic to just mess around with different objects, and in rare situations it's a lifesaver that you can move whatever you want. And you're probably going to make your way through Act 1 and 2 fairly quickly, that's by design, because Act 3, LOG introduces the first grunty mission of the game. And I mentioned before, she acts more as a rival inside of Nuts and Bolts, and this is what I mean. There isn't really any boss fight in each level. Instead we have these special challenges from the main witch herself that will change the look of the level and be our only Jiggy. And in concept, this is really cool. Letting us constantly having the best grunty to advance through the game is a fun mechanic, but in practice, they don't function much differently from the normal levels, and many of them can be easily cheesed. Case in point, I just hop out of my car and wrench out the object. Work smarter, not harder, fellas. But these special missions are also how you upgrade your trolley inside of Showdown Town. In this case, it gives us high grip wheels. So if you aren't a dirty cheater who used the flying glitch, I know you did, Showdown Town will now really open up after this level. Overall, I do really like the idea behind the grunty missions, but they could have used a bit more thought and a little bit better execution, which is kind of the story for this game in a lot of cases. And then the rest of this world and most of the acts are just kind of used to give us very simple versions of the different challenges we'll see throughout the game, just to get you to start wrinkling that brain and learning how to make unique cars that can handle all aspects of nuts and bolts. You really aren't going to find any groundbreaking complexity here, but it doesn't really try to do that. It just tries to be simple fun. I don't have a ton more to say about Nutty Anchors. It's a very simple, very straightforward world, but I thought it'd be fun to talk about the best and worst Jiggy missions of each world as I get to the end of them. But keep in mind, I did not 100% the game, I simply completed it, so I might have missed a hidden gem or an absolute train wreck here or there. To start off with the best, I have to go with the flying fight against my boy Patches. This was a fairly easy and simple mission. The hardest part was just finding the weak points themselves, but the concept was just so cool and fun to see. And since it was flying based, it naturally had a leg up for me with how much I liked those controls. Plus we had a little outro cutscene, which is kind of rare for the missions. I don't know, just a fun little reference and a good time. To follow that up though, the worst of the bunch came in Act 3, where we had to escort this fit piece of shit for his morning jog. And by God, this type of mission should not exist in a game about cars. You have to drive slow as hell while trying to keep pace, and the grunty bots will spawn and pound him, not like that, get your mind out of the gutter, every time he needs to take a breath. I lost my mind trying to get the trophy on this one, and it was an absolute tragedy of an objective. Just give it a skip, there's easier ones. One small thing before we move on to our next area is I want to talk about this game's soundtrack that you've been hearing throughout this video, because the original Banjo-Kazooie composer returned to the Banjo series like Jesus on the third day, gracing us with music from on high. And look, I'm not someone who could break down all the technical aspects or mechanical reasons as to why his music is impressive. I know nothing about that, and honestly other people can do that better and have done that better. I'm sure everyone's heard about how great the Banjo soundtrack is. But I do know whenever I hear the OST from any of the Banjo games out there, I am instantly transported into its world with a nice little fuzzy feeling. My man is an absolute legend, and if you can only admit this game shares one aspect of greatness with the originals, it's the soundtrack. Fanboying about everyone's favorite Scottish man aside, standing in direct contrast to Nutty Anchors, which was one of the most open levels and fairly well designed, Logbox 720 is almost the worst level in the game, we'll get to that later, but it is by far the most claustrophobic, which is honestly really sad, because if we just go off of looks and concept, this is the best level in the game, bar none. It's really not even close. With just how meta Nuts and Bolts is in general, a level where we're playing inside of a game console is honestly pretty genius, and I don't know if this is related, but at the time of the game's release, the rumor of the next Microsoft console being the Xbox 720 was going around, so this might be a tongue-in-cheek reference to that part of history. There's so many small details that show you the devs really did care and put a lot of effort into making this feel cohesive. For example, if you bump into certain hardware on this level, it will cause your screen to glitch out as if Banjo is inside of your Xbox 360, which is just really fun, and the game is full of stuff like that. It's those little bits of charm I was talking about when we were going over Showdown Town. I think that really shows this game wasn't just shoveled out like a lot of people think it was. The devs did have a vision and they did care about it feels like. But the crowded layout of Logbox essentially converts it from an open world level to one where you need to follow very specific paths to travel around. Sure, you could go off of the 3 or 4 routes they want you on, but then you have to deal with a metric fuck ton of enemies, obstacles, or just straight up weird walls that are seemingly only there to stop you from exploring. Because of that, the best way to travel around the levels is through a helicopter type build, but since we unlock it so early into the game, we aren't set up with the needed parts to make one that doesn't feel terrible to control. Plus, even when you do have a solid design and good parts, it just goes from feeling like walking on hot coals to walking on dull spikes. Sure, it's better, but you're not going to go invite your grandma to do it with you. And then the Act 3 Grunty challenge really doesn't help things, with it being a race where Grunty's in the water and you're on land, which does make sense sense because it's the one that gives us access to floaters. I like that. But in practice, it's just really weird. I didn't actually see Grunty once, as I just kind of drove around in circles in a small area 4 or 5 times, and it kind of just felt like I was doing donuts in a parking lot until the game said, here's a trophy, move on. Honestly, 0 for 2 so far on the Grunty challenges. I'm really hoping that the game steps up these challenges at this point. And then as far as the best Jiggy here, I don't have a favorite. There are very few missions that I genuinely enjoyed in this area, and it does not feel well designed for fast-paced action. The level really stops being great after you look past the atmosphere. Following that, it's no surprise that I definitely have a least favorite, and my least favorite is going to go to the Log's Choice Challenge. This will be a theme going forward. In Act 2, where you have to do a race in these weird-looking, slow kind of cars, and the Yellow G's challenges are at their worst when it's just a pure race. I can accept every once in a while when the car creates a unique mission, but with these races, you have to just drive in this poorly made car that everyone else is using, and hope the gods smile on you with a weird bump or good RNG. I was honestly so sad with how this turned out as a level, because once again, it's so fun in concept, and honestly I think there was a lot of opportunity for really creative challenges, such as repairing hardware, or maybe even references to Microsoft's other games. But in the end, we just kind of got an uninspired, crowded level that felt like they really didn't know what to do with it. They just wanted this concept in the game. Generally don't like being overly negative, and this is an area that I don't have a lot of positive things to say about. Basically, it's fine to get a couple jiggies and get through. It's cool to look at, but you're gonna want to move on to Banjo-Land as soon as possible. And let's actually talk about Banjo-Land now, because it is Rare's self-indulgent walk down memory lane, where it feels like they are working to remind you of the glory days at every single turn, and I love it. Yeah, it's definitely a bit pandering and plays the nostalgia card very hard, but I've always been of the opinion that fan service is not bad on its own, so long as there's something given alongside of it to justify its inclusion. And that's something a lot of people disagree on, saying a game shouldn't rely on making you remember its past, it should just be good on its own. But here, it's not like we're just going back into the old Banjo-Kazooie levels and saying, hey, remember all of this? Instead, it just takes aspects of those previous games, such as having Clanker stuck in one of the corners, and makes missions around it, i.e. our new car mechanic to defend him. Plus, the missions are definitely a lot more varied here, with a lot more one-off, unique mission styles than we saw in Logbox or even Nutty Anchors. And it does that while striking the best balance between being too open and being undrivable, really shooting up as the best designed level layout in Nuts and Bolts. Pretty much everywhere you go in this world has some sort of reference to either Banjo-Kazooie, Tooie, or even some of the mobile games, and as a kid, I didn't even know those were references, but I still enjoyed them and it felt like the game was proud of them in a way. I kind of picked up on the vibe without even knowing what they were, which is really cool, and I think it pushes it past just being fan service. There's a lot of really good missions here, and eventually we'll get to Act 4 where we get another Grunty mission, this time it being our first combat-based Grunty mission. She's gonna jump around with the spring attachment that we're gonna unlock for winning, while we try to unload on her and break the car. On paper, I thought this one would be the coolest yet, but then you start playing it and it's kind of just her jumping away from you, not fighting back, until she eventually gets stuck on something and you unload onto her. Not like that, until the car finally breaks. I think I'm going to chalk this mission as an 0-3 on the Grunty levels so far. It was a step up and it was a little bit harder, but it definitely is not where it should be. It was honestly really hard to pick a favorite mission from this world, because there's a lot of really unique and fun ones. But I think what had to take the crown for the best Banjo-Land mission is what I am dubbing Sheep Golf. Basically, you have to run into or launch these little sheepy boys and get into the goal in as little swings as possible. It really wasn't that difficult, but it sure as hell was a great time, and I replayed it so many times even after getting the trophy, just to try different vehicle lineups, which honestly is not something I did for a lot of other things in this game. And I would say it was hard to pick a least favorite because there were so many good ones, but there is definitely one standout stinker. And shocking no one, it's another Lord of Games choice mission. It's in Act 1, and I'm calling it the Ice Block Push. It's our little Ice Cube friend from the N64 days, and they're melting away, wanting to spend the rest of its fleeting life with their wifey. It's honestly pretty poetic. But sadly, they will be dying alone, since it requires you to use this god-awful pushing car up some pretty thin paths. It is awful. I didn't even complete it, didn't even get the notes. Moving on, never touch it. But now let's talk about something that I do want to touch again, the Gigaseum. That sounded weird, but we're gonna move on. Nuts and Bolts has an obligatory sports level here, and it's one of the most interesting areas. Not in its design, because that's basically an empty arena with a couple of tunnels, and not really because of its theme, that's very basic as well. It's super interesting because it has the highest average level of fun in the challenges. The theme of the level being an Olympic-style arena means that almost everything will be themed around a sports competition or the like, which allows for a lot of classics that are hard to mess up. Besides the pizza one, that was really bad. For shame bottles, for shame. You rarely have good challenges, and I now believe you died for a reason. Outside of one-offs like that, though, I really felt like the missions were unfair or just boring, which I could never say about a level like Logbox 720. I just had a blast enjoying the freedom of movement here and trying out all the challenges that are honestly still fun to revisit. Plus, the environment, while being pretty empty, still feels like it has some spunk and personality. A lot of the arena is just a scaled up version of a tabletop or small board game, like a giant domino or a big old dartboard. It does this while also mixing in more normal areas such as a straight up racetrack. Then in Act 4, we actually get the first good Grunty challenge. Okay, so first off, the entire Gigaseum is converted into a pool, which instantly makes this mission stand out from all of the others just for simply transforming the level. That concept is really something the act structure of Nuts and Bolts allows for, but is rarely fully utilized, and it's honestly my biggest complaint about the game that they didn't do this more. The challenge itself involves fighting Grunty in her coolest looking vehicle yet, a giant fucking lobster, while we work to score goals with the beach balls spawning all around. It did take me a couple of tries to get the boat design working to get the trophy, meaning it was the first Grunty level to take more than one attempt. So you know, that makes us 1 for 4 on these quote-unquote bosses. Let's try and finish strong, log. And thankfully on that note, this is the only world to get 2 different Grunty missions, with the second one being even better. It does lose the unique water setup, but makes up for that in the premise and gameplay. You have to protect pool balls from Grunty's laser by either pushing them around or just straight up murder. It took me a good handful of tries to get the trophy, and once again, it really stepped up the game for these mini bosses. Then the laser you unlock in Showdown Town is not only the best late game weapon, but can also be used to remove the laser barriers around that same town for more crates and just easier access to previously unlocked areas. That Act 6 Grunty challenge is actually going to take the cake for the best mission of this world. I don't have much else to say about it, but yeah, it's pretty good. Can you guess what the worst one is? Yep, it's another log's choice, and spoiler, it's the same thing for that final level. And I already mentioned this once before, because we have to use a pre-built car, plane thing to carry pizza to the hungry spectators around the arena. The controls for this thing suck, it has trouble fitting through the smaller tunnels when leaving with the za, and the hitboxes on our delivery cheesy treat barely register. Bottles really should have just stayed home on this one, or more aptly stayed in the grave. He is actively trying to ruin my experience with this game. All of that brings us to our final level, and it's widely considered the worst in the game, and that is widely correct. It's not without a little bit of charm, and the space theme can be interesting at times while lending itself to some entertaining challenges. The main issue is it takes all of the worst aspects from a level like Logbox 720 without the redeeming factor of being the best theming in the game. The routes between each main area are confusing, the landmarks are so sparse and hard to make out that I have trouble remembering where anything is, which is also an issue I hadn't run into in any of the other parts of my replay so far. And that's all while the mainly purplish and green uniform aesthetic makes it all blend together into one pretty unsavory sight. Yet even while it blends together, at the same time each area somehow feels disconnected from each other and completely unstreamlined. You can't easily drive through the level since that's full of random hazards, hills, water, or just difficult to navigate terrain, but you also can't fly through the level because the same hazards exist in the air, and close together vertical paths will destroy any somewhat open area. I really don't understand what kind of car they wanted me to make for this level, and in the end I just ended up using my best plane and dealt with the fact that I'm going to constantly crash into things. I don't have so much to say about this level because I genuinely don't have a lot of redeeming factors to it, and I don't like to be overly negative. So I'm just going to move on to the Grunty fight because it's the final one in the game, and I mean that literally, since most people will have beaten the game before doing this. Spiral Mountain is unlocked at 75 jiggies, but Nuts and Bolts still gives you more content by still having acts open up past that, which is fine in theory, but having one of these be a Grunty fight and trolley unlock is a little bit weird, since by the time you get 90 jiggies to unlock it, 90% of players probably already sent Grunty off to be an indentured servant. And on top of all of that, the challenge is just kind of mid as hell, so then pretty much every single Grunty mission has been a disappointment outside of the Gigaseum. She just stands there invisible and dies to torpedo spam. Super engaging gameplay. For beating her, you unlock the Horn, which is pretty much only used to unlock the super park crates around Showdown Town. And again, unless you're going for 100%, you're probably done with the game at this point, so you don't even really get to use them. Strange boss fight timing aside, at long last we're going to return to Spiral Mountain. And while this isn't the most creative world to end our playthrough on, I really can't help but enjoy flying around this remastered version of the iconic landmark. Grunty's lair is still in shambles after years of neglect, but everything is just at a higher quality version of the previous game's starting location. Rare really did manage to find some missions also that fit here inside of this pre-made level. They were both enjoyable and challenging. Plus, we get to hear that Spiral Mountain remastered theme one last time, and honestly, I am in heaven with it. It starts out by completing LOG's tasks to prime us for the Grunty fight. Here we really get to test how well you can make and design vehicles for every type of problem. It involves flying, combat, transport, and races all wrapped into one big challenge. Then, as is tradition with Banjo games, we get a quiz show sprinkled in between each section, with each correct word removing time from your overall score. Honestly, I kinda had fun with the questions. It was a nice mix of things you would have noticed inside of Nuts and Bolts, and then some references to the older games to reward fans of those titles. It's honestly the only real link for the older games that we have in here, so I'm just trying to enjoy what I can. All around, it's a nice wrap-up and skill display to show that we have mastered the design system and all of the controls of these cars. It's a pretty similar story when you get to the final fight against Grunty. Whereas Lord of Games tested all-around mission versatility, Grunty is entirely focused on all different types of combat, whether it be ground, air, water, or invisible. It's not quite as well done as the log missions, but it wasn't overly hard, and I had fun seeing all the different cars that Grunty had designed. My personal favorite was having a witch's broom as the finale. It just hits, I don't know. Altogether, this set piece really did feel like the only time in the game where you had to make a car that can function in every possible area instead of just one, maybe two, really letting you flex creativity one last time before it goes away. And I've seen the complaint that this game doesn't fully prepare you beforehand with its difficulty progression, which I actually can kind of see but don't fully agree with. Yes, you haven't had to combine all these aspects before in the same way, but isn't that kind of the point of the final level? It takes the different skills that you mastered from each section of the game and then test them all together. But you know, that is just my silly personal opinion, and I really can't see the other side. It worked for me, it probably doesn't work for most people. This game's not very well liked, I get it. After we do beat Grunty, we get a nice callback to the start of the game where LOG once again uses the power of Comic Sans to stop Banjo from beating up an old lady, instead forcing her to be a servant for life inside of his factory. Which one's better? I don't really know, it's a little morally gray. But we do get a hint that she's going to be making the next game. However, given when this game came out, it turns out she is a little bit slow on development, but hey, Star Citizen showed us that it can take more than 10 years of dev work, so there's still hope. And maybe we can get some more microtransactions to fund it. Lord knows they did. We finally end on a little scene of Banjo getting cheered on by old and new friends from the series, and this abomination of a car. But hey, you know what? He loves it, so good for him. And that pretty much wraps up Nuts and Bolts' story. There are more acts unlocked after this, but really it's nothing we haven't already talked about. It was a wild ride to go back and explore this final entry of the Banjo series. Hopefully not forever, but you know, I'm not really holding out much hope there. And this is the part where I'm supposed to ask you to check out all of my other retrospectives and end the video. However, like any good Xbox 360 title from its time, Nuts and Bolts released Logs Lost Challenges, a DLC with more missions. It takes place inside of the Testo track and contains 6 new challenges that are done with both fan-made Logs Choice vehicles and one of your own. And I gotta say, it was really lazy. We get no new area to explore, and the world is just the reused Testa track, which really doesn't lend itself to actual challenges. Yeah, it works as a playground to test different types of cars, but that's just because it isn't built for anything technical, just throwing together a few set environments for playtesting. Honestly, I bet this is where the devs first were testing their car mechanic and just decided to leave it in the game as a playground. Some of these new missions are challenging and can be a bit fun, but 100% do not live up to the standard of being a paid bonus, just something that should have been patched in for free, to be honest. My favorite was definitely the basketball carry, with the crown stay and race thing being as a solid second, and the rest were very meh, with a special mention to the awful sumo wrestle with the police captain, which involved pressing right trigger until he fell off. It is riveting gameplay, let me tell you. For completing these missions, you get an uncolored piece of a puzzle for a picture, which then gets colored in when you do the player's choice. It's a pretty fun reward to look at, but again, it's really not worth doing everything for that. That's really all there is to say about the DLC. It's a very short set of missions that don't make you feel anything. I would skip it on a normal playthrough if I wasn't making this video. Okay, now we really have covered everything in the game. Or at least everything I deemed worth covering. The list isn't exhaustive, and there are some stuff I skipped over. Let's just wrap this up. Because at the end of the day, Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts exists in kind of a weird space. It's not what longtime fans wanted, but it's really not a disaster class some might make it out to be. It took a lot of risks, some that didn't really make a lot of sense, but some that were pretty good. But at that same time, it really alienated a lot of the original fan base. The vehicle building mechanics were genuinely innovative and fun, and ahead of its time in a lot of ways, offering a level of creativity that very few games had back then. But in doing so, it sacrificed what made Banjo-Kazooie so loved in the first place. Top-tier platforming, new world exploration, which yes, Showdown Town had some of it, but not nearly enough, and a sense of progression that wasn't just things like part upgrades. For those who went in expecting Banjo 3, this was definitely a massive disappointment. But if you look at it for what it is, a unique vehicle-based sandbox that's a little bit of a spin-off from a beloved series, it's pretty solid. It's just unfortunate that it came at the cost of one of N64's most beloved platforming pairs. And again, that's really just the core issue of Nuts and Bolts. It's not that the game itself was bad, for the most part, but it replaces something people deeply loved. And if this had been a brand new IP, or even a spin-off starring one of the original side characters, maybe it would have been celebrated for its originality. But then it probably wouldn't have sold that well if it was a new IP, so who knows. And by using Banjo-Kazooie as the face for this experiment, Rare set expectations based on the original duology, which it was never actually trying to match. Yet there's still a bunch of charm. The humor is there at a lot of spots, and the creative possibilities of the cars create a lot of fun. I mean, it's odd for sure, but it's a game that still has a somewhat small following of players that can really appreciate what it tried to do. So will we ever see Banjo-Kazooie in a proper, full-fledged adventure? Probably not. Meaning this is all we have from the Bird and Bear in an even somewhat modern console outside of Smash Bros. So if you love the Bird and Bear, you kind of just have to try and enjoy this, which is a weird feeling. Honestly, if there's anything to take away from all of this, it's that Nuts and Bolts wasn't a bad game or a great game, just one with an identity crisis that can be fun all the same. At least that's my ferret-brained opinion. Once again, I know the general public hates this game. Anyway, thank you all for coming along for the ride. If you're still here, maybe check out one of my other extremely long dives into random games, like this one on screen, and I hope to see you in the next one. I don't know when my next video is going to be, but it will be coming, I can assure you that. Again, thank you so much if you're still here. See you in the next one. As a whole, the zombies community really hates Advanced Warfare. In fact, I would wager that if you asked 10 players at random what the worst zombies experience was, they would say Vanguard. But after that, they would probably say Exo-Zombies. Though, going into this retrospective, I wasn't really sure how I felt about the game. On release, I really enjoyed parts of it and put a lot of hours into grinding the maps. Then last year I replayed the first 2 maps with my friends and was very frustrated by a lot of the mechanics. So I kept an open mind, re-downloaded Advanced Warfare, crashed several times trying to load onto the servers, then loaded up the first map to answer the question, is Exo-Zombies overhated or is it really just that terrible? Outbreak, no, not that one, is the first and simplest map of the 4. Its main purpose is to introduce us to Exo-Zombies' quirks and mechanics while attempting to hook in the player, and it does a decent job at that. It's just unfortunate that a lot of Exo-Zombies' less than ideal mechanics are also on full display here. Despite the game's namesake, you don't actually get your exosuit right away, starting as a peasant who has to earn the fun jumping abilities. I know why Sledgehammer did this, add a sense of progression to build up to the power fantasy Treyarch Zombies sets out to achieve. Though, exosuits are the main draw of the game mode, and it feels really bad when playing without them since the maps are all designed with that kind of movement in mind. However, once you do gain access to these suits, you're gonna know very quickly if this game and mode is for you. Personally, I am a certified simp for this kind of movement. Any game that allows me to make directional air dashes, double jumps, or in general make me feel like I'm playing Titanfall is a win in my book. This is most definitely gonna be going into the great things about this game category. But this is where things get a little bit dicey with the game. Remember how I said that starting without the exosuit just kind of felt bad? Well, in the later rounds, you best get used to playing without it, or half your screen for that matter. This is because one of Advanced Warfare's 12 special zombies emit an EMP blast that disables your exo movement and covers your screen in glitches. Now, I get this is an attempt to keep the later rounds interesting, forcing you to think on your feet, no pun intended, and react to playing at a disadvantage, but it's really just done poorly. First off, these things spawn way too much. If you cut them in half, it would maybe be an acceptable mechanic. Then, when you are hit, sometimes you will just instantly down because at a certain point, pretty much all of the other zombies have exosuits of their own and will jump on you right away. And the sad thing is, this game's high rounds are already fun and difficult without needing Electro to guest star. Unlike Treyarch games, you can't simply just run around the AI in circles. They're sporadic and will move to cut you off and try and swipe you out of the air mid-jump. If Sledgehammer played more into that kind of AI and zombie movement, I believe the game would have been much better received. It feels like the core of a fantastic game is trapped under a pile of needless additions. A couple of the other added special zombies are placed inside of their own round. First, since it's a zombies game, we have to have a dog round. This is the better of the two, basically acting as an easy max ammo and a break in the hectic gameplay, much like they are in Treyarch games. Then we have the infected zombies. These guys are stinky. So stinky, in fact, that if they touch you, a countdown will start. When that countdown hits 0, you will die. Since this game is so fast-paced and the zombies are so fast, you are gonna get hit several times a round. These rounds then become a cycle of kill some zombies, take a hit, run to decontaminate, kill a couple more zombies while on camo, get hit again, repeat. And that's not fun. It's not challenging. It's just tedious. There's also not much help from these guys in the later rounds in the weapons department either. The closest thing this map has to a wonder weapon is the Stealth Recauterizer, but that's kind of a stretch since it falls off around the same time as other good weapons. Really, the best box pulls are the equipment. Nanostorms will slow you and damage zombies in an area, basically giving you a free safe space, and then the distraction drone will act as this game's monkey bomb. The Nanoswarm is a really fun addition and a unique spin on these equipments that we saw from Treyarch, and then obviously the distraction drone is just a monkey bomb, but that's still nice to have. Keep up with the increasing zombie health, you're gonna have to use the upgrade system. And oh boy, this sure is a mechanic of all time. To fully upgrade your gun inside of Advanced Warfare, you'll need to do it 25 times. Meaning, you will have to spend 62,500 points to get one gun to max power. For comparison, Black Ops 4 and Infinite Warfare's upgrade system will end up costing you about 15,000, and both have significantly more power than a level 25 weapon in this game. This was done to try and keep the late game engaging, always giving you something to spend points on, but in practice, it just feels like absolute garbage. Each gun upgrade barely feels like it has any impact since they have to spread it out over 25 times, and the only good thing about it is the free max ammo for your weapon. And God forbid you take a down on co-op. Since you rarely have a backup stock of points, if you full die or just lose a lot of perks in your down, in this game you slowly lose them over time, depending on how long you've been down, similar to Black Ops 4, you're going to be playing catch up for the next 3 or 4 rounds, when you can hardly kill anything. This is better on solo since you only lose Exo Medic, which costs 500 points. While we're on the topic of perks, Exo Zombies comes with your standard Treyarch set of Jug, Quick Revive, and Speed Cola, though no double tap here. Then they added 2 new perks. My favorite one, Exo Slam, which can be a quick way to get down from the air and stun zombies around you with a little bit of damage. Then Exo Soldier, which is good, but it honestly should not have been a perk, but a standard mechanic of the game. It allows you to shoot and reload while sprinting, and that's pretty much it. Following that, Exo Zombies comes with a set of drops that players are used to, with its own version of insta-kill, nukes, double points, and fire sale. One unique addition is made on top of these with security, a really cool power-up that activates all traps on the map for its duration. Some more help for the player comes in the form of supply drops that will land in the spawn room every couple of rounds. These bonus items will contain points, a version of zombie blood, a turret, or a flying robot friend. I really like this addition. They're risky to grab mid-round with how fast-paced the game is, and they do help a lot with the difficulty of the game at times. Okay, I think now is a good point to start talking about the story of this map and game. Advanced Warfare's zombie outbreak started because Atlas dropped a DNA bomb, basically this world's version of a nuke, and it infected everyone who got hit. Not wanting to waste this experiment, Atlas then captured a lot of the infected individuals, which of course broke out and overtook the facility. Our main crew was working here at the time, and met up at the helicopter pad trying to escape, only to watch the helicopter get taken down on approach. Our goal with this Easter egg is to simply call for help and get extracted. What I've found, people generally don't like this egg, and I think it's because of one particular step. You have to collect 4 security cards, one for each character, to gain clearance. Some of these are fun and a good use of game mechanics, like when you have to hit buttons while in an area and infected. Then you have quite possibly the worst Easter egg step in Zombies history. In it, you have to go down a trash chute by either opening both sides at the same time or just opening it twice in solo, then run around the furnace room, shooting the floor, hoping the card will pop out. You're on a time limit before getting kicked out of the room, and with bullets flying, you can hardly tell if the key actually came out, so you have to just spam interact and pray. I honestly don't know who was on more drugs, Sledgehammer when they designed this step, or the players who somehow discovered it. Once getting the 4 cards, all you have to do is play kill confirmed with the zombies and then interact with the DNA pad one more time. Then we get probably the most underwhelming end to a map I have ever seen. The only reward you get for completing it is the achievement and the ability to spend yet another 12,500 points on upgrading your gun to Mark 25. There's actually a second ending that got discovered at the end of Advanced Warfare's story, wherein if you melee all of the zombies inside of the kill confirm step, you can actually get saved, though this isn't canon and I don't have footage of it because I'm not masochistic enough to do a step like that. Altogether, Outbreak was a decent introduction to the game mode, and if you enjoyed this map, you'll likely have fun in the next maps, as I generally think that maps 3 and 4 improve on the formula presented here. Notice how I didn't say map 2? If you've watched any Zombies ranking tier list, you might know that Infection, or as most know it, Burger Town, is generally considered to be one of, if not the worst map of all time. Allow me to explain why. Back in the day, I was actually a pretty big defender of this map, and just to be clear, it can be fun at times if you're willing to look past a lot of the issues. I was so into the EXO movement system that anything else that happened in the map didn't really matter to me. So if you love this map and are about to hear me say pretty much nothing but bad things about it, I've been there and I'm sorry. On the surface, this is basically just Outbreak but bigger. A lot of the same enemy types show up, there are no new perks, infection rounds and dog rounds make their return, and it's about the same amount of time to play without your exosuit. The problem is that the additions they made are all pretty much bad bar a few. The 2 worst offenders are the survivor escorts and the zone lockouts. Starting with the lockouts, these come on random rounds and completely stop you from entering parts of the map. The goal is to force players to not get comfortable training in one area and have to explore the whole map, but man, if this is not the most annoying mechanic when you just want to get shit done. Oh, do you need to head into Burger Town for an Easter egg step? Nope, wait around. Maybe you need to rebuy perks? Nope, gotta wait around. Need to buy ammo for your main weapon and it's inside of a zone? Fuck you and good luck, Buttercup. Honestly, realistically, it's just one round of lockout, and in the early game, it doesn't matter that much, but once you start getting into even the 20s, it feels so bad when you're just waiting in an area to open to progress your quest. And that happened to me multiple times throughout my Easter egg attempts. Then we have these survivor escorts. Now, in theory, I'm actually okay with this kind of thing. Add a side objective that can benefit the player if they manage to complete it. The issue comes in the fact that the reward is a 2,500 point upgrade, and the punishment for failing is losing power on everything for a long period of time. That means no gun buys, no 3D printer, and most other buyables will be gone. Because of this, you need to try and keep the survivor alive and not ignore it. That's not simple though, because often the survivor will get completely blocked in by zombies as they circle them. So if you run out of explosives or you're just at a round that the guns kill slowly, it feels incredibly frustrating to watch them die as you pump damage into a horde. And that's not even to mention how easy it is to go down while doing this since your focus isn't on yourself. That might just be a skill issue for myself, but I'm gonna blame the game to make me feel better. Inside of that horde that is snacking on those minimum wage employees, you'll notice 3 new basic enemies added into the map. We have Spiky Boys, Gooey Boys, and Swap Boys. The counter to both the Spiky and Gooey Boys are to just not get too close, and Swap Boys are the same as normal enemies but a little bit more tanky. We also have a new boss zombie. I would say it's most akin to the Panzer on DE, being a tank that can shoot out electric grenades that in this game EMP you, and has a powerful close-up attack. Now I want you to prepare yourself, because this is the first praise I'm going to give the map. I think this is a really cool boss and a great addition. I'm normally against taking the exosuit away, but having it come in the form of a boss that isn't around very much and relies on an up-close, unique way of doing it doesn't feel annoying. I would like to say that you can use the new weapon, the Magnetron, to take him down, but you're better off with pretty much anything else. I will say it has an awesome design and is incredibly satisfying when it does kill. Actually, my favorite part of this map was having this thing on insta-kills and watching every zombie just explode around me. Sadly, the damage is very subpar even when upgraded compared to other guns, and it will probably get you killed when trying to use it. This map's layout is divided into 3 main sections: the spawn room and its 2 attachments, the sewer, and Burger Town. The spawn areas in Burger Town feel like any other standard location, nothing really jumps out about them or feels unique or notable. The sewers are an interesting concept though, and I really like the idea of an alligator trap that eats the zombies, but goddamn this place is dark. When doing the Valve Easter egg step, I got so frustrated with not being able to see, I maxed out my brightness, but that just gave the darkness a slight white tint and somehow made it even harder to see. There's also the issue of a game like Exozombies really struggles when being confined into tight spaces. With how fast the zombies can dash and block you around, you start to dread having to walk into any of these in-between areas of the sewer, and one EMP blast can easily lock you up long enough to go down. Now, I've mentioned the Easter egg a handful of times, so let's talk about it. The goal is to make a hamburger. No, really, that's most of it. This is my least favorite egg so far in these retrospectives. The first step is to grab a frying pan, then make your way into the sewers to try and find 4 randomly spawning valves to spin. There are at least 20 different spawns for these things, and sometimes I was looking right at them but couldn't tell because of the aforementioned darkness issue the sewers have. If you don't have a video pulled up with all the locations or have them memorized by heart, this step takes a ridiculous amount of time for something so simple. To give credit where it's due, the next step is actually really fun. Head into the newly opened sacrifice room and kill zombies around the place golden pan to get some meat. This is a lot harder than you'd think since the room is so tight, and I took several downs here in my attempts at this game. That's okay though, since the difficulty feels like it comes from a lack of skill in some areas versus the map just being poorly designed. I can't say the same about the next step. You need to find 4 pieces of meat that, as far as I can see, have 37 different spawn locations around the entire map. And these aren't huge, easily seeable things either. Look at this one hiding in the trash can. It's a metaphor for the map. The next couple steps are just alright. Get some buns, taint some meat, and cleanse yourself. Then feed it to our fearless mascot leader. After that, we just have to grab his batteries and get the key. Then we have another very annoying step. Shoot the alligator while he eats the undead to get an arm. This sounds very simple, but he pops up so quickly and can be so hard to see that it'll probably take a few attempts to get this done, which is really frustrating in this kind of game. Then, once we do finish the Easter egg, we don't even get the cutscene right away. We have to end the game and go open it in the menu, which just feels so anticlimactic once again. In said cutscene, our crew is saved by Sentinel, the group working against Atlas in this story. They land in, say that one of our characters need to die, while the leader raises his pistol, leaving us on a cliffhanger for the next map. This actually was an interesting way to conclude it, and created interest while we're waiting for the next drop. But it quite literally had nothing to do with the Easter egg we just did. It just happened. It really felt like everything in this map was working to make my experience worse. And spoiler alert for the tier list at the end, it will be overtaking Transit for the worst map spot. There are some good aspects about it, but not nearly enough to outweigh the bizarre choices made by Sledgehammer when thinking of new additions. Generally, these next 2 maps are thought to be of decent quality, so I'm hopeful as we take the seas into the 3rd edition Exozombies Carrier.
One shot to the head, my head, and the fog lifted.
Oh my god! They killed Kenny! You bastard!
So, right off the bat, this map is a lot better. While I dislike not spawning with the exosuit still, Carrier feels by far the best when you don't have it, which carries over into the later rounds when you get massive amounts of EMP zombies. I think this clip is a perfect example of how spawn rates need to be adjusted. Honestly, this map was really a breath of fresh air after suffering through infection. Unlike that DLC, this really feels like an extension of the mode, not just Outbreak but bigger. It also corrected a lot of the mistakes we saw in the previous map. For example, instead of the survivor escorts, Carrier has bomb defusals. Every couple of rounds, get a notification saying that a bomb has been planted by Atlas, and leave to fight off their soldiers to get in and defuse it. Taking them down offers you a free camo, making the zombie pileups a non-issue so long as you can take down the soldiers. This is a pretty easy side task to do. It only takes a couple of shots normally to defeat the enemies, and you get a free power-up for doing it. If you fail the area, it'll be blocked off with the same gaps you saw on Infection. If you don't need to use an area, you can honestly willingly let this happen, since there's no randomness once you know where the bomb is planted, meaning the punishment is not too severe and the reward is decent. If you do somehow fail 3 of these in a row, a Goliath will spawn, but honestly that never really happens since this is really easy to do. This map also thought of us degenerate gamblers by giving us a Plinko machine in the area connecting the 2 spawns. This is an important part of the Easter egg, but it's also just a fun thing to waste grenades on. You know what they say, 90% of gamblers quit right before they would have won big, so keep trying. That machine sits in the armory, which is basically the central hub for the map. It has the first printer location, 2 grenade wall buys, an upgrade machine, a gun wall buy, plus the gun and grenade disposals, which are big in the Easter egg. It's really nice to have so many important pieces located in one area and helps a lot with early progression. Outside of that, there's a lot more open training here than the other 2 maps, with the most notable being the moon pool and cargo areas. It feels really nice to finally have some solid training space in the game and not feel like a caged animal the entire time. To complement the addition of real training areas, we have the first actual wonder weapon here in the LZ-52 Limbo. It shoots out a lined laser, similar to a limbo stick, obviously, that will kill zombies in front of it. Unupgraded, it's a one-shot until round 12, then it depends on how much you've packed it. This is a massive improvement to the Magnetron from Infection, bolstering a super fun design and actual power to back it up. Alongside that, we also have the addition of a new perk, 2 new power-ups, and 2 new supply drops. Starting with Exo Stockpile, this perk increases your ammo by 20% and gives you an extra slot for both grenade types, while getting 2 replacements instead of 1 per round. This was 100% implemented for the Pachinko step of the Easter egg, and I thank Almighty Sledgehammer for thinking of this. For our 2 new power-up drops, we have an infinite ammo drop, which is something Treyarch still refuses to implement even though it's always amazing when it's in the games, and explosive touch. For this, think of the all-star power-up from Mario, killing every zombie that touches you instantly. Both of these are a lot of fun, running through hordes as your screen splatters with YouTube-friendly ketchup stains, or mowing down enemies with a shotgun or limbo that never has to reload. As far as the 2 new drops go, the new turret is pretty forgettable but decent, and the ability to call in sentinel reinforcements is awesome and definitely helpful when dealing with the bomb defusals. When looking at other additions, there are no new boss zombie rounds, choosing to return the infection zombies. I have honestly come to accept these as just part of the game, but I still think they are a garbage mechanic. We do have a new standard zombie though, the Blinky Boy. This enemy type will teleport around, that's pretty much it. I really like them. Unlike the ninja zombies on Infinite Warfare, they don't just spawn in front of you and cut you off. More so just making sure you keep moving and are aware of what's going on around you. It's challenging, but not unfair. They aren't the only thing that can teleport though. One of the 2 new equipment types is the teleport grenade, and it does exactly what it sounds like. This is super good for getting out of tight spots, and is one of the most creative bonus items I've seen in zombies. Alongside it is basically a trip mine, and it does good damage, but it's kind of boring and not worth taking up the slot. Okay. We've established that this is the best gameplay Exo Zombies has, so what about the main quest? Well, I'm happy to say, this is my favorite egg in the game so far, and it rivals even some of the early Treyarch ones. It is the best at using the game-specific mechanics as well as the new ones introduced on the map. To start off, we have to use the new teleportation grenades to get into an area you would think is unreachable and flip a generator. This allows us to start messing with the Plinko machine. Then we play a fun little minigame where you get to shoot the teleportation grenade into the slot and then hit the mini special grenade types in a specific order to light up the other side. At first, this can definitely be pretty annoying, but once you get the order down, it's pretty great. Remember, gambling is always a great use of your time and money, so keep doing it. People who have seen my channel before know I love die rise, so obviously the parkour step that comes next is gonna be a favorite of mine. You have to get drunk and jump around the lasers to get the needed item. You don't have your directional dashes, just double jumping, so you have to be locked in to make this work. The last 2 steps are pretty fun and simple too. One is to dig up spots on a tropical island, and the other is to use a fish to attract a shark. Then just go blow up the final vault and you're good to go, my friend. This isn't exactly a short egg, and it's not super easy, but it is simple. And that's what these quests should be. Something that isn't needlessly complex, but offers a lot of fun, unique mechanics, which I think Treyarch games started to lose track of more recently. The final cutscene also directly ties into the map's activities this time, having us look to escape before the ship goes boom, but we get sidetracked when Oz makes a reappearance after having been shot in the intro. Maybe he is like Kenny. He was around throughout this map as a voice in the computer, and it's starting to set him up as the big bad of the final map. And honestly, at this point, I was really starting to get invested in the characters. I love Carrier. It's a solid map that really allows the mechanics of Exo Zombies to shine in a way that the others 2 didn't. As the game goes on, it really feels like Sledgehammer is finally starting to iron out what exactly they wanted from this mode. To conclude the game, we have a map that fans have been asking Treyarch to make for years, a deep underwater city and base. Descent most definitely gives Carrier a run for its money. We start out on top of a raining ship, which is probably the most aesthetically pleasing part of the game so far, and dropping into the main sections, you'll notice that the map is almost entirely inside, which could have gone very poorly if it was limiting with how much exo movement you have. Thankfully, it was all designed in a way where, unlike the sections of Sewer on Infection or the hallways of Outbreak, you are rarely limited in how much you can use the suit. There is always room to do your jumps, dashes, and move around the zombies. This leads Descent to be one of the best designed map layouts that AW has. Inside of these halls, there are no new special rounds, once again choosing to reuse the infection and dog zombies, but there is a new normal zombie with the Chargy Boy. These are faster than the normal zombies and will use their exo jump a lot more often. There is one new zombie, but he doesn't exactly roam the halls. He is Zombie's first boss fight that appears throughout the game, and it's Oz. Oz is pretty pissed about the whole dying thing. I mean, seriously man, get over it, it was like 2 whole maps ago, and he decided to take his anger out on us. 3 separate times throughout the game, Oz will teleport you to his arena, which contains an upgrade machine and a 3D printer. The first time he just taunts you and kind of shows you what to expect in the actual fights, then the next time you'll have to fend off zombies while attacking him when you get the chance. You'll need to explode his room 4 separate times, and then you're granted a lot of points and a max ammo. On the final time, Oz roids up and charges at you as a big ol' beefcake. You'll have to flip the 4 generators on and decontaminate him to get rid of his armor so that he can be hurt. This isn't really a difficult boss fight, and obviously it gets one-upped by the more modern ones, but for being the first, it's actually pretty fun. I also like that, since the Easter egg takes a while, you'll more than likely do this while completing it. That makes it not feel more connected to the quest you complete. Unfortunately, there are no new perks or power-ups, but we do get 2 new wonder weapons. Firstly, we have the Trident. It's less powerful than the other one, but it's a lot more fun, especially on infinite ammo. Watching the balls bouncing off the walls to each enemy is great, and it's always fun when the wonder weapons are something that's not just a stronger bullet gun. Now we have the Blunderbuss. You only get 1 shot at a time, so exo reload is a must, but it can carry you pretty far into the game. Honestly, I don't really see how it fits into the map thematically. Maybe I'm missing something, but I'm still glad it's here. I would say both of these are more fun than the Limbo, but only the Blunderbuss is as useful late game. We do get 1 new score streak from the supply drops, and it is a doozy. You get an anime mech suit that shreds zombies and keeps you from taking damage. This is my favorite of all the score streaks in the game, even if it's not as powerful as something like the Sentinel reinforcements. When put together, this map's features and design create a system that feels like a conclusion to exo zombies. Everything from previous maps that were brought in feel like they peak in design and fun, creating a climax of the gameplay. So then, all that's left is talk about the Easter egg, which is the best of the 4. It's definitely a good amount longer than Carrier, with more challenging steps that do progress more rounds. Almost all of them hit the right beats though, and you keep engaged throughout the long process. My favorite part about the egg is that in between each of the typical Easter egg steps, like hitting a button in the water, Oz instigates a challenge that we have to beat. This is my shit. I love when Easter eggs do this. Things like complete a round with only grenades or stay above 0 points when moving costs money feels like something a modder would do for fun challenges with their friends, and I mean that in a good way. I've never played World War II Zombies, but I hope that Sledgehammer continued this kind of thing with those eggs. Outside of these challenges, the actual steps are great as well. My personal favorite part is the parkour on the deck, obviously, and this is a fantastic step for a conclusion to a map. It forces you to show off all of the exo movement you've learned throughout the game and use all of the small little intricate mechanics that you have available. This map ends inside of Oz's mind, which in concept is dope, though I wish they would have gone further. The only reference to previous maps is the Outbreak bus, and the monologue he gives has overly edgy anime character vibes. I think they could have cut out the Simon Says step and onward, and instead chose to extend this mind section. Maybe add a final boss here instead of just fighting waves of zombies, or as you travel through different distorted sections of the map to reach a goal. But all of that is just wishful thinking on my end, and it does somewhat work, if not a little underwhelming. I feel like I've said that a lot about the way these eggs end. Our final cutscene shows that we have hundreds of more Oz's ready to go, but sadly there was never a continuation of this story, so we'll never know what they had planned. When factoring the quest into the gameplay, I think this map just barely beats out Carrier as my favorite Advanced Warfare experience. It has some issues with the pace of the setup, and it can feel a little underwhelming in terms of basic design, but it has tight, fun gameplay. And these last 2 maps have made me excited to see what Sledgehammer manages to do with World War II, if they're able to keep this trajectory going. That all begs the question, is Advanced Warfare any good? Honestly, I think it gets too much hate. Outbreak is a mid-tier map, though Infection definitely deserves all the hate it gets. Then Carrier and Descent are honestly pretty high-tier experiences and a lot of fun. I wouldn't say it's in the same tier of games that any of the first 3 Black Ops reach, but it isn't this terrible creation that many of the community makes it out to be. Likely I will end up coming back and replaying these maps from time to time, sooner rather than later if I end up having to go to round 100. And I'm honestly glad to have rediscovered the parts of the game that I loved.
So, you want to hear a story, huh? One about treasure hunters. Have I got a story for you?
There are very few games that can say they defined or created an entire genre on their own. These are the games like Rogue, Dark Souls, Mario 64, and of course the original Borderlands. These are legendary titles that became synonymous with their genre and cornerstones of the gaming industry. So today, when someone says the phrase looter shooter, 9 out of 10 times this is going to be the series you think of, with its unexpected success inspiring massive hits like Destiny and not so massive hits like Suicide Squad or the Borderlands movie. Seriously, what the fuck were they thinking with that? Now, as always, with videos like this, full spoilers ahead for the original Borderlands if for some reason you clicked on this video and still haven't played it 15 years later. But what was it about this game that resonated with so many players? Since on the surface it just looks like a standard 2010 shooter with some cel shading thrown into the mix. Was it maybe the flawless game design, top tier graphics, or maybe it had gripping writing ahead of its time?
Engorge, the only product ever to be personally endorsed by notorious ladies man, Mr. Shank.
Yeah, so this shit is tits, guys. You should see what my bitch thinks of me now. Her name is Chad Nina, and she...
Okay, so maybe not that, but also maybe yes? I'll get more into it later, but the story of Borderlands 1 ranges from non-existent to incredibly simple. So if you go into this game expecting something on par with the Halos of the time, you're gonna be disappointed. But what the writing did have though is traces of that same Borderlands charm it would later become known for, just in a much more subdued, less in-your-face manner. Well, yes, a lot of the jokes have definitely not aged gracefully into the modern day. Even lines like that, at the time, really separated the vibe of Borderlands from the gritty, serious shooters with the likes of Gears of War or Call of Duty that dominated the space. This gave it a purpose to exist outside of just being another run-of-the-mill shooter. Plus, its characters were actually funny a lot of the time.
Man, my girl Lainey, she perfect, man, blonde, great body, distantly related to me, great body, but then fridge rats brainwashed her. You gotta snap her out of that cannibalism crap.
So with the writing being pretty much hit or miss, that leaves the gameplay. And by God, did it nail that for the time. When Borderlands was released back in 2009, the ability shooter craze hadn't really taken over yet, even less so with the console gaming player base of the Western world. And in looking to carve a niche for itself, this once Mad Max clone rebranded into an RPG class-based shooter. The devs forewent the standard character creation where you simply pick a class and match it to whatever you want, and instead intertwine the personality of each class with their own set playable character. These classes are designed to be as simple as possible to help draw in new players to the genre, while also hitting 4 very different playstyles to leave room for every kind of combat that people want to use. Going through those characters, first we have Brick, and yes, that is his real name, and it fits him pretty well. Basically, you just punch. When using Berserk, he simply drops his guns, gets real tanky, and starts throwing hands with the nearest psycho. This is for the players who just want to be in their enemy's face and frontlining, not so much for a slow and tactical playstyle. Dialing back the steroids just a little bit gives us Roland, who uses a turret. It's pretty much a standard soldier class for players coming from the Call of Duty type franchises, with an ability that's just use and forget, since the turret will work on its own, and pretty much all of the skill tree paths focus on all-around passive upgrades, such as increased weapon damage, heal faster, or turret changes. Next up is Mordecai, who follows that up as a standard sniper class, because obviously every game needs one. And while Roland was a mix between a slow and aggressive playstyle, Mordecai is built around using snipers and other long-range weapons for a critical hit-heavy game. Basically, if you aren't hitting headshots, you won't get very much out of this class, which does make it the highest skill floor, but he also does have Bloodwing, which on top of just being the best boy, gives players help if they can't hit their shots, but they still really want to play in the gimp suit. And then finally we have Lilith, who since this game has come out has pretty much become the main character of the franchise, and she's what we'll come to know as a Siren, which are basically just girl bosses with magical powers inside of the Borderlands universe. She's more of your all-around class, not stuck in one niche, bouncing between supportive, elemental, and assassin. Her ability, Phase Walk, turns her invisible and increases movement speed. Then when it's finished, will blow up nearby enemies. I've always enjoyed playing the elemental tree, and that's what you'll see mostly footage of here, but it's by no means her only build. With the characters out of the way, let's talk a little bit more generally about those skill trees. Much like the classes themselves, these are the watered-down versions of what you would see in other RPG games, once again helping with the transition into ability-based shooters for new players. You still have the option of bouncing between the different branches to really min-max, but having self-explanatory paths to follow with just one big upgrade at the end was a fantastic way to help bring in those new players without requiring them to consult the almighty fan wiki every time they want to have a decent build. Looking at you, Destiny. So this setup, working in tandem with the very simple classes to understand, really helped propel this game into the mainstream. Okay, so enough yapping about setup, background, characters, let's start going over the actual gameplay. And just as a preface, mostly everything in this very long section will be centered around my solo playthrough, but it's important to keep in mind that 4-player co-op was a big draw for Borderlands 1's marketing, and does fix some of the problems I have. After selecting your character, which should have been Lilith by the way, you get dropped off right outside the now iconic town of Firestone, where we meet everyone's favorite character, Claptrap. Okay, so I joke about that now since he's really become the punching bag of the series, but at the time people loved this little guy. The sort of annoying but in a lovable way robot who's programmed to only sound upbeat even when quaking in fear from gunfire was a pretty genius idea and a great hook for players experiencing the game for the first time. Plus on top of all that, it keeps the tedious but necessary tutorial section engaging. Miniature Jack Black will quickly introduce you to the two main things this game will have you doing: shooting and looting. Genre name makes sense now, right? And okay, I don't want to make too many comparisons to the later games, since the goal of this video is to look back on out in Borderlands 1 and see how it became such a breakout hit for the time, but when you are going back and playing the original, it's very clear this was a rough draft of what would come later, with both the shooting and looting have some pretty clear issues. That's not to say it isn't fun though. Even in this first combat section, the gunplay feels good and the character movement is solid. Plus the instant feedback of bigger and bigger numbers on screen are a cheat code for injecting dopamine into our monkey brains. It's basically the basis of those shitty mobile game apps you see. Most of the issues come with the big combat set pieces later on and some of the bosses, so I'm gonna hold off on commenting too much about it till we get to those. I will, however, talk about the looting system, because good old Claptrap introduces us to our first chest. Get familiar because we will be seeing many. As this game proudly boasts, it has bazillions of different guns. Yes, an obvious marketing statement, but it's not as much of an exaggeration as you might think, or if you know the franchise, you already know what it's all about. It was the big allure to the game, letting us loot goblins, live out our dream of finding new things, and getting that one-of-a-kind item that our allies just can't. But unlike the later games, the drop table for these enemies are not unique. Instead, you can get almost any gun at almost any time, with the drop rates of better weapons being linked to a hidden strength value each NPC has. And I think the point of this was to avoid forcing players to grind the same bosses and encounters over and over again, since they weren't really sure if the new player base would commit to that, but in practice, it just ends up being frustrating when you cannot find a better gun, or you don't feel like you're getting meaningful upgrades as you take down the bigger bads. The gun variety comes from the fact that each weapon has a manufacturer that does better with different niches, and each part of a weapon can have a different manufacturer. These combinations create different, mostly unique weapons with different strengths. With only a few exceptions though, they didn't really give us a ton of special feeling guns in the base game. Most of the time the only changes you'll notice between weapons are damage types and some stat upgrades. But once again, you won't really start noticing that for a couple of hours. Right now you'll be getting introduced to the world's ethically questionable doctor, Zed, who is the in-universe reason why you can buy shields and other meds all around the planet, which is a really clever way to explain a game mechanic, which gives the game a vehicle to deliver more humor and world building when the machines have his personality. We end up seeing the same thing with the money-hungry arms dealer Marcus. Going to kill some skags for Zed and saving Claptrap after an ambush are the first set of quests you'll receive, and it's a pretty standard system. Talk with this person or interact with this thing to get a short wall of text to explain the mission. And those two quests are two of the three main kinds we'll see in the Borderlands series. A fetch quest, a go kill some random thing mission, or a long drawn out joke. This is probably the system that has been changed the least over the years, with the only real changes being how fast you'll level up, since it's pretty slow in this game. Doing that, Zed will eventually give us our first shield, meaning we are now just one upgrade away from having every part of our character ready. On the surface, it functions just like you would see in Halo, but the shield mechanic also leads into the loot goblin energy that Borderlands wants to go with, since you don't simply upgrade it with your levels or through stats, they spawn in through vending machines and chests just like any weapon. For all of its flaws, the loot system fully commits to its identity, and I absolutely love that every part of your kit is some sort of find. It makes that moment you get that one really cool item feel like hitting Cloud 9. And realistically, one of the big reasons this game might have blown up the way it did is it's basically a hidden gambling simulator a lot of the time, hitting you with constant dopamine overflow in basically the same way that Feastables took over the minds of children. Just kidding, Mr. Beast, please don't sue me. So after meeting up with TK Baja and getting some grenades, it's time to take down the first boss of the game. The characters have been yapping about some bandit leader named Nine Toes, and now it's our job to take care of him. That mission takes us to Skag Gully, our first new location outside of Firestone, but for the most part it doesn't feel distinct from Firestone at all, which is a common theme among new areas in Borderlands 1. A lot of it just looks and feels the same, which can be a little bit disheartening. Also around this time though, you'll be ticking to level 5, meaning your class ability is now fully unlocked. Giving you this class ability right before your big first boss fight is great timing, both giving the player a sense of confidence going into the fight and also as a way to build an expectation that it might be pretty difficult, since if you need this upgrade to complete it, what's the challenge like? That goes hand in hand with the planned gun stash you have to go through that will likely give you 2 guns better than both of the ones you already have. So how is the actual Nine Toes fight? Well, environmentally it works really well. The location is the first we see of the Psychos, an enemy that would later become the mascot of the franchise, and the cave arena feels like an appropriate place for a bandit boss. As for the actual combat though, well, it's a challenging fight, unless you get lucky like I did on my playthrough and one of the dogs drops a really strong shotgun, which kind of just proves the point from earlier that where the full randomness of the drop cycles can lead to some really clutch moments and hype finds, but it comes at the cost of properly balanced fights if your player can suddenly end up with a near legendary right before the first boss. Then you also end up in a situation where you probably won't be changing your weapons out for a long time, since now it's unlikely you're going to find something better. Sadly, that design flies in the face of what Borderlands is really meant to be, and the opposite can also be true, where you're punished heavily by the game for not getting any legendaries late into the game, since by design you can't farm bosses. The chances of that happening are going to be a lot higher than pretty much any other game in this genre. But after beating 3 balls, you get to spend about an hour or so doing random side quests inside of Firestone, and Firestone Part 2 to keep up with the enemy levels. You'll probably start to feel the fatigue of long runs between the mostly empty areas pretty quickly, and while the environments are nice, and because of its unique art style, the game has aged better than you would expect for a late 2000s shooter, it's still a bit boring when you need to run back and forth around the same area 4 times. Thankfully though, this is when you get to talk to Scooter for the first time and unlock the catch-a-ride system. But before we get fully into that, I actually want to take a moment and talk about the fight for your life mechanic, since the quest to unlock it is the first time I actually really got to use it in the game. Basically, to help encourage players to fight more aggressively and not hide behind cover all of the time, Gearbox implemented a sort of second chance game design. Once your health hits 0, you can get a kill to heal back up and stay alive. This is one of the best choices the game devs made, since without it almost every class would have been forced to play an extremely slow playstyle, absolutely killing the pace of the game. It can be pretty annoying that you can't move around while in this mode, since oftentimes enemies can be just out of range for you to get that kill, but that is a small complaint in the grand scheme of things that I can ignore. But anyway, after killing Bonehead, you get your first vehicle, and since this game was originally designed to be a Mad Max car combat game, I am sure they nailed the vehicle controls, right? Well, let's just say there's a reason they pivoted away from that design. The car movement is just kind of fine, if not a little bit clunky. Not anything to write home about, but it's not going to make the game unplayable. The actual combat between cars is pretty bad though. If you have to kill anything inside of one, just try and run them over if at all possible. The turret feels clunky and inconsistent, and the explosives are much weaker than it feels like it should be, all while still being pretty tedious to use. But at this point while you're driving around, you might notice there still really isn't any story to the game, and that kind of changes but also kind of doesn't when the random voice in our head tells us to take down a certain bad guy. So you might think we're starting to get a little bit of story direction as you keep completing these seemingly random quests. And you kind of do, but again, it just feels like another random fetch quest, making it hard to tell the difference between the main quest and the side quest at this point. That does lead us to what I would consider the first really unique set piece of the game though, Sledge's safe house. Because so far, every area we've had to fight in was very open. Even the caves that Ninetoes lived in had plenty of room to run around. But the safe house is mostly made up of small hallways with plenty of cover, but also not a lot of ways to escape if an enemy like a badass psycho gets on top of you. And yes, I did spend 10 minutes trying to deal with this asshole. While we're trying to learn how this game's combat functions in such a small arena, we're subjected to multiple high-level badasses back to back for the first time. All of that creates a pretty steep difficulty curve compared to the relatively relaxed fights up till now. And that's not really a bad thing, though I do wish you weren't forced so hard into the side quest because of it, because if you want a fair shot at clearing these encounters faster than a snail's pace, you'll have to do pretty much every side quest offered to you, or suffer the consequences of being underleveled. Games of this genre tend to thrive when there are enough side options where you can only do the ones that look appealing instead of being forced into every single option available. Borderlands 1 does not have that. And those side quests are not short. You're gonna spend a couple of hours working your way through them so that you can get to the main story missions, which also still feel like more side quests since the plot hasn't gotten started yet once again. And while I did have some fun during those grinds, I think the main problem I have with it is just how silent everything is in these quests. It's hard to imagine if you've only played the later games, but Borderlands 1 was going for a more atmospheric, relaxed environment for the most part. For example, in one of the early quests I completed, I had to run around and pick up different parts, so it's a pretty standard fetch quest. And nowadays, you would expect a lot of input from whoever gave you the quest, or maybe the enemy that's trying to stop you, but here it's just silent walking and the sounds of combat. This does help keep the game immersive, so I can see why it was done, but on long grinding sessions when you simply just want to progress the story and need to level up, it can get a little bit boring. To better illustrate what I mean, take the quest The Hidden Journal, where we meet Tannis for the first time via audio logs. We're rewarded for finding these by getting a whole story about how she lost her mind on this awful planet while trying to research alien tech. It's one of the few early game quests that really build out the world and cast while also hinting at what we may see later on. And it's really great. I wish we saw more of this. That issue's at the forefront when it comes to actually accepting and turning in quests. A lot of the time there's zero conversation between you and the NPC, so it just feels very mechanical and lacks a lot of the charm that exists elsewhere in the game. But again, all of that isn't to say I don't enjoy the quest grind of this game. At times it was actually really fun and I found some pretty unique and entertaining jobs. The best quest I found while farming for the safe house, for example, was one that takes you to an arena where you have to fight multiple rounds of skags, with each quest tier getting harder and harder. This is basically the alpha version of a certain DLC we'll talk about later, and at least here it was a pretty cool idea. Once you are finally able to clear the safe house and complete the steroid-filled mini-boss, you unlock access to your second real boss of the game, Sledge. We also hear from Commandant Steele for the first time, who's basically the main antagonist of the game, even though I use that word very loosely, because you rarely hear from her throughout the entire game and only actually see her twice. Neither time really giving much personality outside of, we want Vault and I am comically evil. Sledge lives in the Headstone Mines, which is an interestingly designed combat piece, because while on the surface it looks like like just any other outside area of the game, the miner base type setup makes the navigation and search for loot pretty entertaining. Plus, it has intelligent design that opens up a lot of different ways to deal with enemies and be smart about your pathing. Overall, it's not a hard area to clear, but it does have some level of challenge that makes the boss fight feel earned afterwards. My only real complaint is that the spawn points for deaths are really far apart, but that is a common theme throughout most of the game and can be solved by simply getting good. The actual boss fight is a bit of a mixed bag, being about on par with the Ninetales fight. His gun isn't really a threat, but the slam attack he does when you get too close causes the most issues. Plus, he does have a full body shield that can eat a lot of extra damage added on top of the normal shield that all enemies have. The only time I really felt like I was gonna die in this fight though was not because it was challenging or because I misplayed, but instead my character would get stuck constantly inside the ground and be unable to dodge his slam. It wasn't too big of an issue since it never actually downed me, but I can see that being very frustrating if that was what got you killed, and it's a piece of design that probably should have gotten fixed before the release. Killing Sledge gives you the first part of the vault key, which is finally explained to us by the AI after we pick it up, then still yaps about how it belongs to Atlas, and now you can start to put together what the rest of the game is going to be, a fetch quest for the vault key fragments, which can work as a setup, but they don't really do anything with it until you're in the vault itself, which is why people tend to say this game has a pretty lackluster story. Oh, and this either or door when you're going into the boss is a funny little piece of design. Didn't have a place to put that, but it got a laugh out of me and I wanted to mention it. At this point, we also unlock our first class mod, another key piece to Borderlands character building. I really enjoy how all these small upgrades from different areas eventually combine to make you feel like a real badass. Of all the RPG elements Borderlands tries to pull from, I think that's what it does the best. So now that we have the first part of the key, it's time to move from the small town of Firestone into the Doll Headlands, which looks pretty much the same, but bigger and more open, mostly consisting of large stretches of empty land meant to push this game's car mechanic to the forefront. So naturally, the first set of missions here involve getting fast travel up and running so you don't have to use the cars as much as possible. This is a godsend at this point in the game, since I was really starting to get tired of all of the needed backtracking when running or driving between the quest areas or just going to turn stuff in. But now with car navigation as the name of the game for a bit, that means we get to experience the wonderful Borderlands vehicle combat in all of its glory. Before I said the driving mechanics weren't game ruining, and they still aren't, I want to make that clear, but specifically the car versus car fights are by far the worst part of this otherwise very fun game. This is something that's better in co-op, but still not amazing, and playing alone, it is just a miserable time. Because honestly, I was just considering using explosives to deal with the cars instead of fighting in one myself, it was that bad. But I couldn't really do that because we get a required mini-boss that's full-on car combat in a tiny arena. And the pattern of beating this fight is simply get in a car, kill as many ads as possible until your car inevitably breaks, die, get a new car, repeat until there's just Mad Mel, then come back with the new car and hope to God you can get enough damage on him before that one breaks. Plus, here we really see that the car physics in this game make zero sense, which can get incredibly frustrating in these longer set pieces. I straight up just ended up finishing Mel with a shotgun instead, since that felt easier than trying to use the cars for the fight, and this section is clearly an attempt to salvage what time they spent making a Mad Max combat type game, but in the end it just shows why that was abandoned. Borderlands is a fantastic game that would have been much better off had they just bit the bullet and fully removed the car combat. Thankfully, our suffering was rewarded handsomely, with us unlocking the real hub of the game, New Haven. This charming little trash town contains the most NPC interactions you're gonna get in the base game, which still isn't a lot, but you do get to some random people that you can talk to get a sense for the world. Pretty quickly though, we're asked to go to the Rust Commons and find Tannis, the scientist that was hinted at in the side quest I mentioned before. As an area, Rust Commons feels a lot like Headstone Mine, where we travel through different bandit camps of varying difficulty, and once again, it's not incredibly challenging as a subsection, but it was enjoyable to explore on my way to find Tannis. It's also the first appearance of the new enemy type with the spiders, which don't function that much differently from the Skags, besides having a more accessible crit spot, but it's nice to have some more variety. We're consistently seeing new enemies added as we go through the game. Tannis lets us know a little bit more about the vaults, really getting into the plot finally, and tells us how we can keep getting more parts for the key by talking to Crazy Earl, which of course leads us to Earl's scrapyard, which is by far and away my favorite location yet. It's the first outside location that doesn't feel exactly the same as the rest of the game in terms of vibe and structures, with the giant trash piles, scrap towers you have to parkour around, and the dirty swamp-like water helping it stand out from the dry, dust-covered areas of Pandora at large, even if the enemies are still just bandits and psychos. So after politely entering Earl's home, he sends us to Treacher's Landing, which I guess just proves that the best locations in Borderlands must run through Earl because this area is on par with the scrapyards in terms of design. That might just be because it feels the exact same as the scrapyard if it was just put on an island, but that doesn't matter because it still stands in contrast to almost the entire rest of the game. The actual level design throws a curveball too, with an insane amount of explosive and elemental barrels absolutely everywhere. It's a small change, but it created a lot more chaotic fighting space that would often down me for not paying attention, while also making some sections easier when you notice a well-placed barrel. Oh, and by the way, we're only here taking the lives of so many random people because Earl simply wanted some booze, which is great and perfectly fitting for the humor of Borderlands. So then once we get our best boy Earl his booze, turns out he's a dirty fucking liar who doesn't have the key anymore. So now our fetch quest continues as we go find Crom in the aptly named Crom's Canyon. Also, as a side note, while I do side quests before entering here, this is when I got my first legendary, which is roughly 7 hours into a 13-hour story, which isn't the worst timeline, but it goes to show how the shared drop tables can create a really long time before you get your first high tier gun. And the canyon itself has a very interesting design, with the area's walls rising high on both sides, you know, like a canyon does, making progression mostly one straight line. That's something we don't see often in this game, and even less so in the outdoor locations. Now that doesn't mean it's just one straight line you walk in, as the architecture runs up and down the side of the canyon, and the raised rock platforms create some variation in how you can move forward. It makes for a very unique fighting set piece that plays the elevation more than anywhere else in the game. And that design philosophy continues heavily into the actual Crom fight, making it the best designed boss fight of the game so far. Because instead of just being an enemy with a higher health bar, Crom is actually a pretty quick boss to kill once you get close to him, but getting close is the issue. He sits at top of his canyon with a turret that can almost instantly down you if you stay out of cover for too long, meaning you're gonna have to fight your way all the way uphill while parkouring to different mounds to get to him safely, then manage not to blow yourself up with his goon sitting behind him next to a bunch of barrels. It's honestly a fantastic way to add difficulty to a boss fight without unfair feeling mechanics or overly bullet sponge enemies, making this the model that I wish most bosses in this game were modeled after. Putting a bullet in the back of his head will give us our second vault key piece, getting us ever so close to that loot-filled dream of Pandora's vault. Then we get a little cameo from our AI friend, basically saying, hey, I'm watching, just not helping. So thanks for that, I guess. But really, at this point, I was pretty much checked out with trying to get invested into the story, since I'm almost 10 hours in and it still doesn't give you much of anything to work with besides some throwaway lines by Tannis and vague mentions about how cool the vault is. And that's true even after we go give her the next vault part, as she has zero spoken dialogue about this alien artifact. Oh, and quick random segue before we get into the next section, but can we start a petition to retroactively go back and remove racks from the game? Because honestly, they aren't hard to kill, dying in one shot to pretty much any gun in the game, but by God are they annoying. No matter what you're doing, they just randomly dive bomb you and pull you away from your current fight. It's like a little gnat just biting you and flying away before you can swat it when you're just trying to get shit done. All my homies hate the racks, petition down below. Alright, anyway, what does Tannis get us? Well, via a stolen arm, we get access to Janistown, a new section of Pandora that was considered too dangerous for us by New Haven's almighty leader. But since we are the main characters, we clear that out no problem. Suck it, leader, whose name I can't really remember right now. The new combat areas don't feel much different from places like Firestone or Rust Commons, but they are well designed in terms of combat flow, which is pretty much the standard for the game at this point. Sadly, we really don't get to spend much time here, since we need to go right back to Rust Commons for the next main quest. Again, it's a pretty standard find and kill X person mission, but during it, I started to notice the game relying very heavily on just throwing enemies up in hard to reach turrets and making combat arbitrarily slower now. That design was fun for a boss fight, and then maybe the first couple times afterward in normal combat, but it starts to feel like a lazy way to just slow down the player instead of making level designs that would naturally cause you to play safer like we saw before. But instead, now we just get more of the same old towns with 200% more turrets. Once we get through those though, we get to meet Punk Claptrap, aka the best one, and he unlocks Trash Coast. One thing you'll notice right away here is we see actual green grass for what I think is the first time in the game. That alone makes this area stand out pretty heavily, plus the AI woman is in our ear hyping this up as a massive challenge. So this is really set up to be a big set piece for the game as it gets ready to move into its final stages. And interestingly enough, the area leading up to that boss has very few enemies. Normally the game makes you fight through hectic hordes of bandits and other enemies to earn your boss fight, but here we just kind of saunter through the most relaxing location while a spider pops up here and there. Again, this makes it feel very different from the other main set pieces as we take in the greenery. Sadly though, the actual boss fight is the worst in the game and it's not even close. When people complain about this game's bosses just being large bullet sponges, this is exactly what they think of. The only real attack it has is shooting out racks every so often, and you know how I feel about that, but even if they do down you, they die in 1 or 2 shots, so you just get right back up. And the boss itself is so slow it pretty much never gets on top of you, forcing you to just slowly back away and spam it until it dies. And despite our AI girl hyping it up, I think this game knows it is a super easy boss fight since the loot you get is very subpar. No extra chest to claim outside of the vault key piece. All around, I was really disappointed with this section that seemed so promising and unique at first, which sucks because this is the best looking area. Just having that little bit of green grass and vibrance helps a lot when you've been looking at nothing but dirt and metal for the entire playthrough. But hey, only one more vault piece to go and Tannis tells us she knows where it is, so let's see if the next big fight can bring us back into the fold. That mission takes us to Old Haven where we save Osimo. When first entering the town, it appears completely barren, with bodies of previous citizens scattered all around. You even get your side quests from dead or dying bodies of people who fought here. It honestly gives off a really eerie vibe that I love, and it's the closest this game gets to giving you a feeling of dread for what's happening in the world of Pandora because of these mega corporations. Eventually though, you'll run into people who wiped out the town, leading to our first combat with the Crimson Lance soldiers. Fighting these guys feels very distinct from the standard bandits because the AI actually feels smarter and they play behind cover more and stay in groups for the most part. And the different versions of the soldiers seem like they serve a purpose in combat for their side, with the engineers being solid mid-range enemies providing cover for infantry, while defenders are pumping out damage and stopping you from getting behind their newly placed cover. That, mixed with this being the first really lived-in town that seems to have a history we fought in, makes this set of missions stand out as the highlight for the game so far. Plus, it's just really nice to be fighting against a real threat to our goals, with the Lance wanting to open the vault first, even if they do still rely on some annoying turret placement here and there. But saving Claptrap will allow us to get to Salt Flats, which again is just a standard looking Pandora location, to take down Baron Flint. So starting with what I don't love about this, we have to do more car combat. But granted, it's not nearly as bad as before, because the Outriders come one at a time, but it could have been cut from the game without losing much, if anything, of value. Flint's compound on its own isn't too notable. It's a mid-tier level for difficulty and design for the game. That is until you get to the boss fight, and for its credit, it's a really solid encounter. Flint's arena is very close quarters with a lot of high-level enemies running you down, so if you slip up once, it can be instant death. Plus, it has phases of enemies that spawn in alongside other mini-bosses for you to get to Flint himself. All of this while he throws insults down from the top of his tower because you can't get to him, which already gives him more personality than all of Commandant Steel had throughout the entire game. His grenade shotgun is something you also really need to be careful around too, since unless you got really lucky shield finds, it's gonna be one or two shotting you in this fight. Overall, I really like this one. It's a lot better than the bullet sponge we had to deal with earlier. So once we send Flynn back to Michigan and get the key, we get what is one of two actual plot twists for this game, where Tannis only used us to get the key and gave it over to Steel. What the hell, Tannis? I thought we were homies. But now, since we can't let that shit slide, we gotta track down Tannis and get our vault key back. Unfortunately, we don't get the help of our AI friend, since Steel shut down all of the EchoNet communications. Woe is us, how will we survive? We find Tannis and Steel hiding in a set of caves and caverns called the Back Door. Insert obvious innuendo here. This is a really cool location, sort of giving a dungeon crawler vibe that nowhere else in the game has attempted, plus the mix of tight hallways and open rooms create a nice set of variety as you fight your way through. This location climaxes with a fight against the Crimson Royal Guard, a decently challenging, well-designed 3-on-1 fight in another arena-type setting. This game really does rely heavily on big circles to put bosses in, but the environments are generally different enough to not make it feel too samey. A couple more dead soldiers later, we find Tannis, who did sort of betray us, but also sort of didn't, I guess. Honestly, I don't really know, but I guess we're chill now because we are helping her get out of jail and get the Echo back up. The entire fight through the Lance headquarters is absolutely top tier Borderlands. It has constant, well-balanced action, and I was never feeling like I ran to an unfair location then just died for no reason. Plus, the maze-like design of the hallways mixed with long corridors and spacious caverns are perfect for the way combat flows inside of the game. For example, there's one section where you hit what looks like a dead end, only to see 4 badass engineers pop out at the same time. I was absolutely not ready for it, and created one of the most fun non-boss fight moments in my first playthrough. That grandiose endgame feeling doesn't stop when you leave the Crimson base either, because you will soon see that a third party has entered the chat: aliens. The Guardians of the Vault are against both you and the Lance, since they clearly don't think anyone deserves that scrumptious loot. Their design is awesome. These fast-moving, otherworldly beings that are just stringy enough to be both unsettling and hard to hit makes it feel like their design is straight out of something you would see in a modern analog horror series. I really can't sing the praises of this stretch of gameplay from the end of the Flynn fight to where we actually opened the vault enough. Even the long run between the towers when setting up the Echo feels fun to play because of the hectic battles between the flying aliens that are constantly swapping between you and the Lance. Plus, the different routes you can use to sneak around combat if both sides are already engaged with each other creates so much variety in how your individual game is going to play out. And it's so clear thematically that neither side wants you to easily get to the vault. I just love the game so much from this point on. Mostly, but we'll talk about that. Getting the Echo back up leaves us with just one goal: find Steel before she opens up that vault and
take the bitch down.
That motivational line brings us to the Descent, our final location before the vault, and it is fantastic. The Guardians are front and center as the main threat, both from the sky and down on our level, as we have to slowly work our way down the mountain, mixing parkour in with the fast-paced combat. We see flowers and greenery overgrown all around, since this place has not been touched in hundreds of years, all while the walls are lined with what looks like writing or runes in whatever race these Guardians are. It's also mythical compared to the rest of Borderlands, which goes a long way toward giving it a sense of finality. This is also by far and away the hardest part of the game, but still not unfair. If you play smart and you're good at the game, it's possible to go through it without taking any deaths, so naturally I died several times. But the balance between the badasses, foot soldiers, and flying beam shooters was not easy to find, but I have to say that Gearbox Where's Waldo that shit perfectly. This all ends with a grueling final stand between you, the Lance, and the Guardians climbing through an uphill, snowy mountain. This is the first time all game we've seen anything other than a bright sunny day, which really makes it stand out on its own. There's so much going on here that you won't see at all, with hordes of Guardians and Lance members fighting each other while you try and sneak past, only for you to then find yourself in the middle of another fight. It's never-ending, rewarding action, but then you finally reach the top. The music cuts out, and our AI motivational speaker gives us one last pep talk, and then it's time to head in. Bastille is already there and set up, giving her villain monologue as she opens the gates and we prepare to fight her for the glory and the loot. But then something else happens. The real plot twist of this game is that the vault is actually meant to hold in a monster known as the Destroyer, who promptly one-shot Steel, meaning the main villain was only on string for a grand total of 2 times and we never see her do anything, at least not in the main game. But the twist of the vault holding back this Lovecraftian monster is actually kind of perfect. We take that for granted now since we all knew it was coming, but throughout the game we are told how awesome this vault is and how it's a bunch of fantastic loot. We just have to unlock it. And that is the one thing about the story that's the most clear from the jump. And with this game's goal really just being get as many cool guns as possible, we have no reason not to believe that's the case. So yeah, for all the flame I gave this game's story, this was a good twist. With all that being said, this is the final boss, so how is it gameplay wise? So, alright. I don't think it's a controversial take to say the final boss really sucks. Honestly, if I thought the mammoth looking thing from before was a bad bullet sponge, this is the most absorbent motherfucker I've ever met. The Destroyer is a boss that doesn't move, has one real attack pattern, and eats more ammo than you can carry. No, seriously, on my fight with him, I fully ran out of ammo on my guns before I could kill him. Luckily, I had picked up one of the infinite ammo weapons and had it in my backpack so I could kill him with that to finish the fight, but that was almost really bad. And its attack patterns aren't even that cool either. It just spawns in these rack reskins that do some poke damage, then shoots out its purple hentai tentacles for some easier crit spots, then sends a purple beam from one eye and repeats. This shit kinda sucks, man. But even with the lackluster ending, the final section of the game I think really showcases what Borderlands had the potential to become in later entries and the DLCs, and we are still rewarded with a ton of chests for having defeated this big bad. Which, if you haven't played the games before, might have you thinking, well, why does getting loot matter if the game's now over? Well, besides the DLC, beating the story of Borderlands is really only the beginning of its gameplay loop, because we have now unlocked the appropriately named Playthrough 2, where you do the exact same thing, but with higher levels, harder enemies, and better guns. I'm gonna hold off talking about that fully for now though, and go through each of the DLCs in order of their release, starting with the zombie island of Dr. Ned, who is totally not Dr. Zed, so don't think that. This is the DLC that I actually remembered the least about, and the one I'm pretty much the most excited for simply because it's zombie themed, and I simp out for anything like that. I really like that we get a full cutscene that set the mood for the DLC and the new area. It comes in the form of the bus driver at the beginning of the game, telling a story to what I assume is his kid. It is campy as hell, but it got one of the bigger laughs out of me from my playthrough so far.
So some bad crap was happening, and it got really spooky. And this is where our story begins.
Is any of this going to be true?
Yes, probably a lot of it. You're adopted.
And the beginning environments are really nice too. Jacob's Cove feels nothing like anywhere in the main game, in all of the best ways, which is exactly what a DLC should be. Once you start exploring the island, you'll find zombies and defilers. This DLC is new cannon fodder. Mowing down the zombies is super chill, and you can just kind of kite them like in any horde game, though the defilers are a little bit more annoying, specifically because they block your vision when throwing projectiles and slow and ground you. But something with range was 100% needed to add some sort of challenge to the battles. Except for the rack reskins they use, we did not need those gearbox. You should be ashamed of yourself. But after we clear out the main town with some sick-ass turrets, we need to go find Ned, who once again is not Zed. He's hiding out in an old treehouse where you have to wait through one of the slowest elevator lifts known to man. But that is the point where I noticed that DLC 1 has already started to address one of the bigger issues I had with the base game, the lack of consistent NPC interaction. So far, Claptrap was just yapping about the situation as we walked, and Dr. Ned was in my ear the entire time I was waiting for him to crank one out. Plus, now when you accept and hand in quests, you get actual dialogue, not just text on screen. That dialogue tells us he's using Skag DNA to work on a cure, and since that sounds legit enough, we take the hidden grave entrance he told us about to arrive at a hospital, which is also where we meet another mini-boss type called the Loot Goon, a bullet sponge with a chest on its back. There's nothing really special about it. Said hospital is guarded by our first boss of the area, a wereskag with a cool hat. Outside of his design, the fight isn't much different from anything you're gonna see in the main game, and was solved with just kiting and mag dumping. Thankfully though, the hospital grounds are very atmospheric, which makes up for some of the same old boss loop gameplay. Taking this medicine we found to Ned's Claptrap teaches us one of two things. One, this model has schizophrenia, and two, it confirms that the character dialogue will be a noticeable step up from the main game. Personality number 2 tells us that Ned is actually a bad guy, and that a boat will take us to his lab where we can go and confirm, which leads us to Deadhaven, which is just a reskin Old Haven from the campaign. I'm not the biggest fan of this since it's just another location that doesn't feel wholly unique, but I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt if it can be distinct from Old Haven in terms of feeling. And to its credit, the lab area is interesting and the different enemies like Tankensteins help it stand out, but a lot of your time here will just be spent standing still listening to audio logs, which yes, I know I asked for more of them, but not in the way where you just stand in an empty room and listen, more so during combat. So after we expose Ned to the Jacobs Corporation, we enter into a contract, meaning we have to head back to Jacobstown via an airlift sent by the corporation. It comes in the form of a pseudo lockdown survival step while you wait for the paperwork to get sorted out. You know, typical business stuff. And that mission section really highlights what this DLC does best, letting you chill and mow down easy ads and just kind of have a relaxing time while you take in the story. It's not hard, but nor is it meant to be. Once you get into the groove, the vibe feels akin to something people on my channel know a lot about, Warzone or General COD Zombies. And no, it's not just because it's undead themed. Back at the town, our unmedicated claptrap friend gets straight up executed in front of us, and since we don't want to end up the same way, we agree to go murder the presumably evil Dr. Ned, but we don't really have full confirmation yet. But now I'm going to talk about what's probably my biggest gripe with this DLC, and we will see it in future ones as well, and that's the insane amount of backtracking and running between locations. There's not enough spaces for cars in this area, so we just don't get any, and all of the main locations are placed incredibly far away from each other. That combines to create a significant amount of downtime just spent trying to get to the next location. It's basically the same problem that Firestone was starting to have before we got the catcher ride running. But as we ignore that and march our way to Ned, he goes full mask off and just straight up shit talking us the entire time, which now makes two antagonists that are more fleshed out in less time. All of the fights to reach Ned are pretty entertaining as well. We get a nice mix of zombie types, plus we get some wereskags to mix things up. You always have plenty of room to move around in, and outside of badasses, you're pretty much gonna one-shot anything that comes near you. Plus the lumberyard that Ned hides out in is probably my favorite location looks-wise so far, and that includes the base game. When you do finally reach him, the Ned fight feels at first like it's going to be massively disappointing, where you can quite literally just slowly walk up to him and spam a pistol while he misses every shot. But then we get a fake out credit scene and undead Ned comes back to fight, which I'm honestly shocked I didn't see coming with how this DLC was set up. So that's on me. The new arena for undead Ned is fantastic. We go deep underground into a massive cave made up of flesh and blood pools, which is the closest Borderlands 1 has gotten to the crazy out-of-world set pieces we see in later games. And really shows that with the upgraded budget for these DLCs they got because of the main game's success, Gearbox knew what they wanted to do and they did it well. I would also say this is a better boss than anything in the main game. Mechanically, it's nothing game changing, pretty much just cycling between going underwater, surprise attack, summon minions, and do some bullshit Beyblade spin that shreds your HP. But it stayed engaging and was actually challenging to finish outside of just being a bullet sponge. And then on top of that, the environments and character 100% elevate this fight into that #1 spot. That is funny and the cave is gross but awesome at the same time. Then everything in the DLC has a constant vibe that feels like it accumulates in this boss. But yeah, that pretty much covers Ned's Island. A pretty short adventure, but it made up for it through pure charm and solid gameplay additions. Like I mentioned earlier, the only real complaint I have is the high amounts of backtracking and travel time, plus the grounding and slowing you get for some of the enemies. Overall, it was definitely worth its price as extra content, and the game is better off for having it. Unfortunately, I don't think I can say that about the next DLC, Mad Moxxi's Underdome Riot, an addition that has a pretty poor reputation in the wider Borderlands community. The tone is set right out of the gate with the intro cutscene, and that tone is horny, which is to be expected with the introduction of Moxxi, aka fan service the character. At least for now. The plot of the Underdome is, well, not really a thing. You're just here to fight waves of enemies until you win. But before we get to that, the biggest change the DLC brought is the bank system, something that will be around for the rest of the series, and it basically gives you more storage and allows you to transfer gear between characters, which is a fantastic quality of life change that I'm shocked took this long to get made. But wrapping back to the actual gameplay, the format of the dome battles are 5 rounds of 5 different waves, which cycle between a variety, guns, psychos, brute type enemies, and then a boss. Unfortunately though, the boss isn't unique, it's just a redo of one you fought in the base game, which is actually pretty lame for a new DLC. They even reuse the same voice lines. There is one fun mechanic that you get once you beat round 1, which is basically that between each wave, Moxxi will give a buff to the enemies that makes it get progressively harder, and they stack based on how far you are, and your player count. This is simple things like buffing their damage or making you use one specific weapon, though they really needed some more dialogue options for each selection, or more selections, because if I had to hear, "Get your boomsticks out" one more time, I would have lost my mind. And all of this is going on while Moxxi horny yells into your ear as the rounds pass, so if you're into that, this might be your favorite part of the game. There isn't any big special final boss to each specific area either. Each one takes about an hour to clear, making this the longest DLC, and it really shows that while Borderlands combat is fun, it is not made to be done in a one-on-one arena for hours at a time with nothing going on. They weren't making Risk of Rain here, yet. The actual environments you fight in are also just slightly reworked locations we've already played in, which contributes to this idea that I got while playing the DLC that it's just kind of a way to get something out while making as little new content as possible. But things like these statue designs probably could have used another look from every angle. Or maybe that's the point, I don't know, this is Borderlands. Outside of that one little laugh, I did not enjoy myself at all here. The loot you get after each round ranges from bad to shit, and the final reward for beating everything is also pretty much nothing. It's actually the only time throughout my entire gameplay playthrough that I dreaded moving on and playing more of it. So compared to the awesome experience of Ned's Zombie Island, this is a straight up 2 out of 10, maybe a 1 out of 10 if it wasn't for the bank. Let's just move on and pretend this never happened. Thankfully, what's up next is the Secret Armory of General Knox, the content that most people know as the point where Borderlands 1 took a massive step forward. Knox himself is also a fan favorite character, and unlike Ned's Island, this promises massive loot upgrades. So how does it hold up now? It's good, mostly. We're teaming up with Athena, a former Lance assassin who doesn't like them anymore since they had committed the minor crime of making her murder her own sister. In exchange, we're offered all the guns in their vault, but first we gotta help Scooter get some upgraded wheels. That's done through a fetch quest that sees us exploring the new T-Bone Junction. This is the best designed hub town in the game, and it has a lot of personality with the way it's set up. I can't explain exactly why, but it makes perfect sense that someone like Scooter lives here. We do get attacked once, but that's really just to let us know that Atlas is targeting us for the story. Our new cars aren't really anything super fancy and do feel pretty much the same as the old one to control, but it does allow us to head into the Crimson Highway to meet up with Moxie, who is in fact still horny, though this time getting to speak with her outside of just announcing. The idea of a highway level and pretty much whole DLC is actually pretty fun. I think it's well designed and has good pacing between the driving and out-of-car combat zones. Plus we get to hear General Knox for the first time as we clear some roadblocks, who is just the most depressed big little man, and I love it. And after talking to Moxie, we find out that our new employer has been kidnapped. So we gotta hop right back into the car and do a silly little prison break. And this is the point where I noticed for the first time, but definitely not the last, that every location you go between is insanely far away from each other, which wouldn't be so bad if this DLC had a single fast travel. There is not a single place that you can travel to outside of T-Bone Junction, which is solely used to return to the main game. And yes, I get the thought behind it. They wanted this to be a car-focused DLC with our shiny new toys, and play on the highway level design. But man, they really needed to just accept that cars were never going to be the focus of the game, because when I didn't have to stop for a story mission, I don't think I took a single fight in my car. I just drove right on by the enemies. The on-foot encounters on the way to Athena are fine enough. The Lance have always been more enjoyable to fight than just straight up bandits, so it has that going for it from the start, and there isn't really anything else to say about it. At this point, the devs figured out how they want to design combat, and it isn't different functionally from the end of the game sections that we've already seen. Shank's prison, though, is a really solid hallway combat section, reminiscent of the Atlas base near the end with the vault. The enemies basically come at you in waves between dialogue sections, and the dialogue is what gives us Shank's personality, and his entire personality is a gay joke. Very groundbreaking. The Shank,
That's Mr. Shank.
Mr. Shank, fight is well designed. Basically just a close one-on-one where you have to time your jumps to avoid getting stabbed as you mag jump. It's not revolutionary by any means, but enjoyable and probably one of the better ones in the game. Killing him does make Moxie sad, even though she told us to do it, and now we can go get Athena from her cell. Which, in kind of a dick move, she uses the teleporter to go home and makes us drive all the way back. And now would have been a really great place to add in a fast travel gearbox, just saying. Because the multiple 1,000-meter drives are starting to bog down an otherwise really well-designed set of locations. This is even more true for the next set of quests, which really just boil down to drive 3,000 to 4,000 meters, do one fight or grab one item, drive another 3,000 to 4,000 meters. It just feels like padding the runtime, and the best part of this DLC was by far the prison break section where we didn't have to touch cars. So we're just gonna go ahead and skip to the actual armory because nothing else is really different here. The fight to enter said armory is some more classic top tier Borderlands 1 combat though. A mix of large open lanes, close quarters combat, and tight corners, all depending on how close you are to the entrance. And once you're in the base, it is ominously empty. Music plays as you slowly find your way to Knox. And when we do get there, he was about to, in monetization-friendly terms, unalive himself. I hate that we have to use that phrase now. But since we're here, he says that we might as well fight, since our Vault Hunter, in his words, will probably win anyway. The fight with Knox isn't bad. Probably the best one we're gonna see. I know I keep saying that, but the DLCs have gotten better and better. Besides Moxie, we were forgetting that happened. And Knox isn't the biggest threat. Very slow moving with an obvious crit spot, but the medics and other devastators that keep showing up help increase the difficulty a little bit. I do wish we would have got a little bit more interaction with him as he dies, but beggars can't be choosers. Which brings us to what this expansion is really known for, and that is the vault we unlock after beating Nox. It's a cool mechanic where you get about 3 minutes to farm all of the chests inside while the bomb counts down. This is the best loot in the game, and it's not even close. Plus people have figured out how to farm it without the timer, so you can really just grab everything and sell it. Basically, this is the kind of loot that the endgame vault probably should have had. And then naturally, the DLC finishes with you traveling 5,000 meters to hand in a quest to Athena. It truly could not have ended in any other way. At least we got a mid-tier pistol out of it all. All that means we're nearing the end finally. We're on to our last DLC, Claptrap's new Robot Revolution. And I was honestly very excited about this one because I still think Little Clap is a funny guy. Right as we enter the new location, we're greeted in the same style of cutscene as Dr. Ned, where our bus driver is telling yet another story to his adopted daughter. It's about the same level of writing as the previous one, so it's solid. And we learn that Claptraps are tired of being slaves and are rising up against their oppressors, which includes us. Are we the bad guys? Don't think about that, because we finally get a proper intro cutscene for Tannis as she gives us the first main quest. And in this area, her personality really shines through a lot more than in the main game, which is likely just because she's actually able to consistently talk to us this time. And that takes us to the Hyperion Dump, where we get our first taste of Claptrap violence and super badasses, which are just badass but even more badass. The Hyperion goons are whatever, but I love the Claptrap designs. For the most of them, they just threw an army hat on and gave them an extra gun, which is so simple, but it fits perfectly what I would imagine the Claptraps would think for an uprising. We also get communist revolution type sayings modified for the Claptraps as we fight throughout the dump, which is a really funny addition to the normal dialogue. A small side effect of getting some parts for Tannis is murdering a bunch of soldiers, but the Hyperion higher-ups actually really like that, so the story has us being recruited by them to deal with the Claptrap uprising. Oh yeah, that new company Hyperion is the last seed we needed to set up for the sequel. Its representative, Blake, is perfectly insufferable, in a way that I think we have all had a boss that gives off Blake vibes at some point, if you know what I mean. Moving forward to turn on the power plant, we'll continue to introduce new enemies, which I'm not too thrilled about gameplay wise because they are just renamed bandits and soldiers, but conceptually the idea of Claptraps taking over human minds as revenge for being enslaved actually does work really well, so I'll forgive it on some levels because of that. The Claptrap caves are environmentally top tier. As you move deeper into the winding hallways, seeing the areas that vary between glowing green to red to almost entirely gray, it creates this contrast between locations and keeps you engaged visually. It even eventually transforms into a full-on facility, keeping it fresh after you fought through the caves for a while. The leader Claptrap informs us that he brought back a couple of old friends, which we quickly see means old bosses turned Claptrap. And the first up we'll end up engaging is General Nox from the last DLC, who just desperately wishes to have stayed dead. The fight is exactly the same, if not a little bit easier since the ads are Claptraps this time, so I won't get too much into it, but I still really enjoyed listening to Nox as we fought again, and this time Nox got a better death line. And it does come with some pretty solid loot. It's basically a Temu version of his armory. Past that fight, this DLC does hold the trend of really long backtracking to hand in quests, but distance-wise, it's not nearly as long as Nox's DLC, so more on par with something like Dr. Ned. Though after making the jog, we're informed of some copyright infringement being committed to make the Claptrap army, and Hyperion treats that about the same level as YouTube does when using a 5-second movie clip, sending in super soldiers to kill everyone involved. It's fair in my opinion. The factory is held in what seems to be the town the Claptraps live in. It has an interesting design and some solid level layouts for combat. Plus, the enemy variety is staying strong with them constantly introducing new types of Claptrap enemies. We even get to kill Dr. Ned again, who's just as much of a pushover as last time. Which leads us into their production factory, which is the best set piece in this DLC and top tier in regards to the entire game. Each small area has some quirk of a Claptrap taking over it, giving the perfect mix of goofy and productive. Plus, we get to fight just Claptraps here, which is when the missions are at their very best. All of that while the big evil Claptrap, or maybe not evil, I'm still not sure who's on the right side here, hilariously tries to convince you that beating all of his minions and destroying his stuff is just a part of his master plan. We just don't get it. Turns out though, while we were out, an assault was launched on our base town, so we have to clear them out before heading to destroy the hive mind. The device we need is hidden in some random warehouses. Nothing too notable about these locations. So far, the most standard of the DLC. What is notable though is that the boss of this area is Commandant Steel. So we finally get to fight this girl after an entire game and DLC season, which feels right as the last bit of content this game sends out. The fight itself is also pretty fun. She's a slippery motherfucker with a fast charging shield, so it can be pretty challenging. But really the main reason I like this fight is we finally get to fight her. There's no other reason really. Taking her down and getting the wired device means it's time to go get the big bad interplanetary ninja assassin Claptrap himself. That is the only time I'll be using his full name. That took way too many takes. He's hiding in a massive Claptrap base, decked out exactly to his liking. He has set up 3 different coliseums for other Claptraps to watch us fight 3 different bosses that he already brought back. The only difference is this time Ned is in his undead form, so it's the much better version of the fight. The others are also just okay. Still being in a Vault remake is pretty fun, but the luster is starting to wear off from seeing them again. But the idea of a gauntlet to reach the final boss of Borderlands 1 is cool, so again, I'll forgive the reuse to an extent. The final boss fight with Claptrap has a nice full circle moment where you're taken back to where the game started, which is kind of a cool way to finish this game's life cycle. Then Claptrap caps the bus driver, but I think he's alive in the next game, so I don't know what's up with that. This boss really does feel like the end of the game. Being the hardest fight by a country mile, our big bad Claptrap hops into a moving giant tank with turrets on each side, a massive laser with a shield, and a section to spawn kamikaze claps. In a lot of ways, this feels like a better version of the Destroyer fight mechanically. Once you're able to take out the turrets, it isn't as difficult, mostly just making sure that the spawn Claptraps don't reach you as you wait for your damage timings, but it's not a cakewalk to reach that point. Altogether, this works as an ending both mechanically and thematically. I'm a big fan. Our reward is also quite nice, it being a room full of really high tier weapon chests. I managed to upgrade every single gun in my main loadout here, which is something I didn't get to do throughout any of the other DLCs, which pretty much concludes our DLC season for Borderlands. Altogether, these were worthwhile additions, except you, and I had a great time going through them, except you. If I had to give it a ranking, I'd probably go Mad Moxie in F, maybe F- tier, then Zombie Island in B tier, then Nox in A, just behind Claptrap, which is also in a high A. I don't think any of them quite reach the level of S. The best part about playing through these expansions is just seeing the game slowly evolve into more of a Borderlands 2 type experience. Still though, we aren't quite done with the game, because like I said however many minutes ago, once you beat the game and every DLC, you have the option to do it again, but harder. Borderlands post-game is really hit or miss for people I've talked to about it. Either you really enjoy the idea of replaying the game but with everything turned up a notch, which does mechanically fit the genre that so heavily relies on grinding for better loot, or you hate that there aren't some good post-game raid bosses for you to do with your friends and get better loot that way. It really just depends what kind of player you are. For me, I think the Borderlands formula makes sense in the time it was released. They really weren't sure that players were going to attach themselves to a game enough for boss grinds and the like. We see that with things like there being no dedicated drop tables as well, and they probably saw the game only had 10 to 13 hours of content without any DLC or post-game. Then with less budget and probably low time, the best move was just to increase the game's challenge and have them play through the same story, as if they were doing another playthrough. I generally do prefer post-game to be more raid bosses and grind focused, but I can also enjoy the fact that I get to re-explore Pandora in a set manner instead of grinding out the same handful of bosses for crazy loot. Overall, the playthrough 2 is a fun time if you really love Borderlands. If you're just kinda meh about it, or you enjoy the game but not a crazy amount, it's probably not for you. And that covers my full retrospective of the original Borderlands. This is a game that I played endlessly as a kid, but I wanted to try and look back without any rose-tinted glasses and objectively see if the game held up. When you compare it to what came after, it does have some serious issues, but that's to be expected with the first attempt. The core of what we all love about the franchise is still here though. A ton of guns, silly characters, bullet sponge enemies, and personality that just seeps through everywhere in Pandora. Then the characters feel different enough that replaying the game with each of the 4 feels like a new experience. I'm not going to go through and give the game an out of 10 ranking or anything. I'll just say that if you enjoyed the later games and have never seen where it started, I would recommend giving it a chance. You have to go in with the expectation that it's not going to be the same level of quality that you know the series for, but it's still full of the same fun energy that you probably love if you sat through this entire video. Thanks for that, by the way. And if you can find a couple of friends to run through the game with you, it's basically the same amount of fun you'll have when you play Borderlands 2 or 3. So if anyone is still here, thank you again for sticking through this entire video, and consider subscribing if you want to see more like it. I have several other full game retrospectives in mind or already in progress, or just general gaming history videos, so you can expect more content in this format. Now, I've kept you here long enough. I'm Coach Ferret, and I hope to see you in the next one. Think back to the year 2008. You just finished the World at War campaign and you're ready to relax. Maybe you stayed up late to do it or you got up early. Either way, everyone else is asleep and you're alone. As the credits fade and you expect the main menu, it's not what you're greeted with. Your screen starts to distort and suddenly you're greeted with this scene. As it loads, the map demands your attention. You hear the echoes of laughing in the distance, but besides that, you're totally alone. Welcome to Nacht der Untoten, or The Night of the Living Dead. Well, it doesn't look like much. It was the foundation of a sub-franchise that still has a dedicated fan base over 16 years later. So why did this small little bunker hook so many people in? First, I believe it's the simplicity in its design. There isn't much to do on this map. There's 3 buyable doors, a couple of wall weapons, and the soon-to-be iconic mystery box. Simple, however, does not mean easy. Nacht is hard. In fact, its difficulty is only second to one other map in the entire franchise. Since players in 2008 hadn't really discovered training yet, you had to camp, and since only one gun really worked past round 20, that not only made for an extremely fun challenge, but kept games short. Back when this was new, rounds like 100 or even round 50 were not thinkable for the average or even good zombies player. Really, everything inside of Noct is a rough version of what the mode would evolve into. Instead of all-powerful, infinite damage wonder weapons like the Thunder Gun, you had the Ray Gun. The core set of power-ups were in the map, but they had yet to get their icons, and things like Fire Sale hadn't been introduced yet. The Mystery Box was here in its full glory, except it was locked in place with no risk besides maybe a bad gun. The other main factor for zombies becoming as popular as it was is that Call of Duty didn't really have a replayable co-op mode outside of the competitive environment that is multiplayer. Sure, you had the campaign, but you're not going to load that up time after time with your friends. You're going to play it once and probably forget about it. With that, this mode kind of acted like a sandbox for you and your buddies. Maybe you wanted to see if you could get to round 30 with just one box hit, or try your luck just inside the starting room. These aspects pushed zombies into the spotlight for Call of Duty at the time with how many different ways you could play it. With DLC season approaching and the success of Nocturne and Toten, there was no way that the Zombies franchise was gonna just end with one entry. So that begs the question of what came next?
Here they come!
Verrückt is where zombies both peaked in horror and pure difficulty. The two aspects work together in every part of the map. Narrow hallways give you little room to navigate around the zombies, while you feel trapped and claustrophobic. Super sprinters will show up in the later rounds to keep you constantly on edge. At the start, you're cut off from your teammates. You need to reach halfway around the map to even reunite with them and turn on the power. Even the box will work against you at times, with several locations around the map it can now move to without even giving you your gun. Don't worry though, not every single thing that's new makes the game harder. Verrückt introduced Perca-Colas, and the four most iconic ones at that. Double Tap, Speed Cola, Quick Revive, and most importantly, Juggernog all made an appearance on this map. These powerful upgrades are also locked behind the newly added Power Switch mechanic, meaning you still have to survive without the help of these new drinks for a little while. The implementation of perks was the most important thing that Verrückt did. On Noct, you could set up completely after 1 or 2 lucky box hits by round 3, killing the progression of the game. Now the player has to slowly build up and spend points to get the power on, then get even more points to obtain their perks and weapons. This type of flow sets a trend that every single map after will follow. The other notable additions were the first appearance of traps, voice acting for the Nameless Marines, and the first musical Easter egg. Plus, the PPSH was introduced onto this map, the most iconic non-wonder weapon in Zombies history. While it's far from a modern Zombies experience, Verrückt is where you can start to see the mode shaping into what it is today. With traps being introduced, players now had a way to kill zombies at any round, not having to rely on weapons that would be outscaled by round 30, marking the first infinite damage source in Zombies. Verrückt is also where Treyarch started to think about the story that would later become integral to the Zombies experience, with Samantha's teddy bear showing up and different aspects like Tank Dempsey being on the map. But even Treyarch didn't really know where it was going at this point, and they were kind of just throwing things against the wall to see what sticks. Even with all of these additions, Verrückt is often the least talked about when discussing the World at War era zombies. This is likely because it was the least played by the community once all 4 maps came out, giving it less nostalgic value. Though, when looking at the evolution of zombies, Verrückt is equally as important as an entry like Der Riese. Even though it fell out of favor once all 4 maps were in the game, Verrückt certainly propelled the zombies community forward in numbers, meaning that DLC 2 of World at War would definitely need to cook up something new for the zombies players. And this came in the form of Shino Numa, contrasting Verrückt as the easiest zombies map to date. But before we get into the map itself, we need to talk about the introduction of the cast of characters that we're going to be following for the next 4 years. Edward Richtofen, the mad scientist. Richtofen is the centerpiece of the upcoming story, having captured all 3 of our other playable characters and pulling the strings to move the story forward throughout the next couple of games. Nikolai Belinsky, the drunk Russian. Nikolai only wants one thing, and that's more vodka. As he kills the hordes of zombies, he will tell you about his many previous wives and their unfortunate fates. Tank Dempsey, the American hero. Tank fills his role of the badass super soldier. He was eventually stated to have been captured by Richtofen after living through the events of Verrückt. Takio Masaki, the samurai. Takio has a great love for his country with a strong desire to serve the emperor and bring honor to his family. These colorful characters are all comedic stereotypes of the countries they come from, leading to some hilarious moments as we see them take down the hordes of the undead. This crew would later be dubbed as Ultimus and is loved by the community and one of the many reasons people fell in love with this game. Shino is very distinct from its predecessor. While Verrückt turned difficulty up to a 10, focusing on a challenging and terrifying atmosphere, Shino Numa offered a more casual experience. Sure, it could be a struggle to get set up at times, but the wide open spaces and only being 1 door away from the box made everything a whole lot easier. Compared to the claustrophobic feel of Verrückt, Every area you'll find in Shino has enough room to easily move around full hordes of zombies. This led to the birth of training, which is the main way zombies is played today. This is why Shino Numa being easy is important to the evolution of the mode. Players need a forgiving environment to practice this new skill and strategy, then they could take it to the old maps to push what was possible on them before. Open space isn't the only reason this map is easy. The box is packing something brand new that every player will want to get their hands on.
They say I've got an electric personality.
The Wonderwaff DG2 is the first infinite damage gun in zombies. Not only that, but in this game it has the ability to get drops, so max ammos and insta-kills are still on the table. This gun is not only iconic due to its power, but its memorable design that players fell in love with at the time.
The Devil's Dogs. No match for the U.S. Marines.
Hellhounds made their first appearance here. While they aren't the most difficult if you're able to get a solid weapon by round 4 to 6, they certainly aren't the paper-thin dogs that you'll see on BO3 and onward. If you aren't careful, they certainly can end your game. Making their return on this map, but with a new twist, are the Perca-Colas. They're no longer linked to a power switch, but instead randomized in different locations each game. You could open Juggernaut by round 6, or you could be locked away from it until the entire map is open. And while this could get annoying at times, it does add some needed aspect of challenge into this map. Some smaller additions that are worth mentioning because they are built upon later are things like the first buyable shortcut for movement, a variety of traps outside of the lightning trap, and the sky beam to indicate where the mystery box is after it moves. While Shino could be somewhat forgettable at times in terms of its gameplay, it did keep inching the game forward, slowly getting us closer to a modern experience. Every map in World at War built off of each other, until it all came to a peak with the final DLC release, Durice, or The Giant. This is the World at War formula perfected. It struck a balance between the head-pounding difficulty of Varuk and the mind-numbing ease of Shino Numa. Training was doable for the average player, but for those who didn't like it, there was the most well-known camping spot in Zombies history, the Catwalk. This was the map that solidified Zombies as a mainstay mode for every Treyarch game to follow, and its formula would be built upon and imitated for years to come. Teleporters were introduced as a way to navigate around the map, and after all three had been linked, the player was given access to the iconic Pack-a-Punch machine, the last missing piece for progression of a modern Zombies map. No longer are players gated from the late game by the restrictive power of base guns. Everyone has a fighting chance, not just the lucky soul who pulled the Wonderwaff. Speaking of the Wonderwaff, it pretty much became unusable on this map due to a bug. If you accidentally shot yourself with it, you would no longer have Juggernaut until you went down. This can be annoying, but it did accidentally help with forcing the player to experiment with newly pack-a-punchable weapons, slowly learning what worked and what didn't. Durice flowed seamlessly with itself. Once power is on, you have access to Jug regardless of which side you came from because the bridge will connect the upper level. Each section of the map contains one perk for you to buy while you work toward unlocking each teleporter, which are located in all three corners of the map, so you do have to open the entire map to get access to Pack-a-Punch. Hellhounds make their return from Shino Numa, but this time they can start to be mixed with the zombies as the game goes on. The newly introduced Monkey Bomb can give you a brief moment of rest to grab a gun or revive a fallen teammate, but the dogs won't follow it, so you'll always have someone coming after you. So you best get your upgraded ray gun and PPSH and hold out for as long as possible on the catwalk. Call of Duty Zombies is a major part of my life. I've been playing it for 16 years now. After playing some of the old games, I grew nostalgic for the feeling these pieces of media gave me as a kid. So I hope that you all follow me as I reminisce on not only every single Treyarch Zombies game, but all the other studio spin-offs with all of its highs and lows. Subscribe so that you don't miss it, and I hope to see you next time to discuss the foundation of modern zombies, Black Ops 1.